He found her stealing bread. The mafia boss paid for everything and told the owner, "She's protected." The hunger wasn't just a noise in my stomach anymore. It was a hollow, aching cold that had spread to my limbs, making my hands tremble and my vision swim at the edges. For 3 days, I had lived on tap water and the half-eaten bag of crackers I'd found in the glove compartment of my 1998 Honda. Now, there was nothing. Coleridge City's Lower South District was no place to be weak, but I had no choice. My car was parked 3 blocks away, hidden in an alley, and I was on foot, staring through the grimy glass of a corner market. The fluorescent lights inside flickered, illuminating pyramids of canned goods and a wire rack of bread. My stomach cramped so violently I had to lean against the brick wall, pressing my forearm against my abdomen. Shame was a luxury. Desperation was a necessity. I was so tired of being afraid. I was so tired of running. Right now, the hunger was louder than the fear. I pushed the door open. A small, tinny bell announced my arrival. The air inside smelled of stale beer, old deli meat, and the sharp, dusty scent of cardboard. A man I didn't recognize was behind the counter, reading a newspaper, his face sagging with permanent irritation. I kept my head down, my greasy hair falling around my face. I looked like what I was, homeless, dirty, and invisible. I shuffled toward the back, past the refrigerated cases humming loudly in the silence. My target was the bread rack. I grabbed the first loaf my hand touched. Cheap white bread, light as air, probably stale. It didn't matter. My eyes darted to the produce bin. Apples. Small, slightly bruised red apples in a clear plastic bag. My heart was a trapped bird against my ribs. I looked at the counter. The man was still reading, one hand scratching his neck. I didn't let myself think. Thinking was the enemy. Thinking would make me stop. I shoved the loaf of bread under my thin jacket, holding it tight against my ribs. I grabbed the bag of apples and pushed it into the deep pocket of my coat. I turned, walking slowly, not too fast, just a customer who decided not to buy. I was 3 feet from the door, 2 feet. "Hey!" The voice cracked through the silence like a whip. I froze. "What's under your coat?" I didn't answer. I lunged for the door. He was faster than I expected. His hand shot over the counter and clamped down on my arm, his fingers digging into the bone. It was a vicious, violent grip that yanked me backward. I cried out, stumbling into a chip display. Bags of pretzels and chips rained down around me. "You think you can steal from me? You little rat!" he snarled, his face inches from mine. His breath was hot and sour. The bread tumbled from my jacket, landing on the dusty floor. "Please," I whispered. The word was sawdust in my throat. "Please, I'm just hungry." "Hungry? We're all hungry. You pay, or I call the cops." He tightened his grip, shaking me. "You think I don't know your kind? Worthless." Tears of humiliation and pain burned my eyes. He was going to call the police. I'd go to jail for a loaf of bread. Roy would find me. The thought sent a spike of pure, undiluted terror through me that was worse than the hunger. "I don't have any money," I choked out. "Please, just let me go. I'll never come back." "You pay or you go to jail. I'm tired of trash like you." He started to drag me toward the counter, toward the phone. The tinny bell on the door chimed again. Neither of us looked at first. The owner was too busy enjoying his power, and I was too busy trying not to faint. A new voice cut through the air. It was quiet, deep, and held an authority that was absolute. "Let her go." The owner froze. His grip on my arm went slack, though he didn't release me. I turned my head, blinking through the tears. The man standing by the door didn't belong in the Lower South. He was tall, dressed in a black suit that probably cost more than my car, more than my last year's worth of rent. His shirt was crisp white, no tie. He had dark hair, cut short, and a face that looked like it had been carved from hard granite. He wasn't classically handsome. He was dangerous. His eyes, a dark, unreadable gray, were fixed on the owner's hand wrapped around my arm. The owner, suddenly pale, let go of me as if I were on fire. I stumbled back, rubbing the red marks on my skin. The tall man didn't look at me. He walked calmly to the counter, his expensive leather shoes silent on the linoleum. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a roll of cash, peeling off 2 bills, a 50 and a 20. He dropped them on the counter. "How much for the bread and the apples?" His voice was a low rumble. The owner was sweating. $7.50, sir." "This covers it," the man said, nodding at the $70. "And it covers the fact that you touched her." The owner swallowed. "Sir, I didn't know she was with—" "She isn't—" The man finally turned his gaze to me. It wasn't kind. It wasn't cruel. It was just assessing, like he was looking at a stray dog that might have rabies. "Pick it up." I stared at him, confused. "The bread," he said, his voice clipped. My hands shook as I bent down and retrieved the loaf. Dusting it off, I clutched it to my chest. The man turned back to the owner. "My name is Luca Moretti." It was not a friendly introduction. It was a statement, a branding. The owner's remaining color drained from his face. I didn't know the name, but it clearly meant something. It meant everything. "Mr. Moretti, I apologize. I had no idea." Luca Moretti leaned forward, just slightly. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The air in the store had become thick and cold. "She's protected. Do you understand me? You don't look at her. You don't speak to her. And you never touch her again." The owner nodded frantically. "Yes, sir, absolutely, I understand." Luca held his gaze for a moment longer, ensuring the message was received and signed in blood. Then he straightened up and looked at me. "Come on." He walked to the door and held it open. I was paralyzed, caught between the terrified owner and this man, this Luca Moretti, who radiated a quiet menace that made my skin crawl. He had saved me, but it didn't feel like a rescue. It felt like a transaction I hadn't agreed to. "Now," he said, his voice flat. I ran. I bolted past him, out the door, clutching the bread. The cold air hit my face, and I gasped, sucking it in. I didn't look back. I just ran, my worn-out sneakers slapping the pavement. I heard the door close behind me. I heard heavy footsteps. "I'm not going to hurt you." His voice was right behind me. I spun around, pressing myself against the graffiti-covered wall of the building. He had followed me outside. A long, black sedan was parked at the curb, so clean it looked unreal against the neighborhood's grime. Another man was at the wheel, watching us. "What do you want?" I panted, my whole body trembling. "You're starving," he said. It wasn't a question. "Get in the car. I'll get you something to eat." "No." The word came out faster than I expected. "No, thank you. You paid for the bread. I'm fine." He studied my face, his expression unreadable. "You're not fine. You're 5 seconds from collapsing. Get in the car. Sabrina?" My blood went cold. He knew my name. The fear I felt from Roy, the constant sickening dread of being watched, of being hunted, came crashing back. I looked at him. The suit, the power, the car, the knowledge of my name. He was one of them. He was just like Roy, only richer and more powerful. "How do you know my name?" I whispered, my throat closing. "It doesn't matter. You need food." "I won't." I shook my head, my hair sticking to the cold sweat on my face. "I won't. Leave me alone." He sighed, a small, impatient sound. He took a step toward me. I didn't wait. I turned and fled, ducking into the first alley I saw. I ran, slipping on wet cardboard and jumping over piles of black trash bags. I didn't hear him follow me. I ran until my lungs were screaming and the black spots that had been dancing at the edge of my vision converged, swallowing everything at once. The pavement rushed up to meet me. My last thought was a wave of bitter relief. At least the hunger would stop. I woke up to the smell of chicken broth. My first sensation was confusion. I was warm. I was lying on something impossibly soft. My eyes fluttered open, and I stared at the ceiling. It was white, perfectly smooth, with elegant, simple molding. I was in bed. I sat up, panic shooting through me like electricity. The blankets were thick and heavy, the sheets beneath me so soft they felt like water. I was in a large, dimly lit room. The furniture was dark, heavy wood. A single lamp was on, casting a warm glow on a tray sitting on the bedside table. On the tray was a bowl of soup, a glass of water, and a plate with 2 slices of plain toast. My stomach roared. I looked down. I was still in my own clothes, my dirty jeans, my worn t-shirt, my threadbare jacket. Thank God. I hadn't been changed. I slid out of the bed. My legs were shaky, but the dizziness was gone. The floor was covered by a thick plush rug. I tiptoed to the door and tried the handle. It wasn't locked. I cracked it. A long, silent hallway stretched out, carpeted and dim. There was no sound, no guards, no sign of the man, Luca Moretti. I closed the door, my back pressing against it. Where was I? I looked back at the food. My body was screaming at me to eat. My brain was screaming at me to run. The body won. I sat on the edge of the bed and picked up the spoon. The soup was warm, not hot. Real chicken, real noodles. I ate it like an animal, my hands shaking, spilling broth on the sheets. I didn't care. When the soup was gone, I devoured the toast. I drank the entire glass of water. The warmth hit my stomach, and with it the memories I had been holding at bay. The diner. 2 weeks ago, Mr. Henderson, my boss, his face slick with sweat. "Sabrina, I gotta let you go." "What? Why?" I'd known why. I just didn't want to believe it. "We're cutting back hours. Sales are down." "That's a lie. Mr. Henderson, I'm your best waitress. You told me so last week." He couldn't meet my eyes. He just kept wiping his hands on his apron. "Look, kid, I'm sorry." "He was here, wasn't he?" I whispered, the blood draining from my face. Henderson's eyes flickered to the front door, as if just saying the name would summon him. "Roy Banner was here yesterday. He told me it was bad for business. Having you here, said you were damaged goods, said you attracted trouble." "And you believed him?" "I believe," Henderson said, his voice low and miserable, "that I don't want my windows broken. I don't want my delivery drivers getting jumped. I got a family. Sabrina, I can't. Here's your last paycheck. It's cash. Just go, please." I took the envelope. $312. 2 days later, my phone, the cheap prepaid one I'd bought, buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You think you can hide from me? You're mine. You'll always be mine." I'd smashed the phone on the pavement. I'd packed my car. I'd been living in it ever since, moving it every few hours, parking in alleys and abandoned lots, until the money ran out, until the crackers ran out, until today. I was pulled from the memory by the sound of the bedroom door opening. I scrambled off the bed, my heart leaping into my throat. Luca Moretti stood in the doorway. He was still in his suit, but he had taken off the jacket. He was just watching me, his gray eyes impossible to read. Behind him in the hall stood the man who had been driving the car. He was broad, with a shaved head, and looked even more imposing than his boss. "You're awake," Luca said. "Where am I?" My voice was a useless rasp. "My home. You fainted in the alley. My driver, Marco, carried you to the car." "Why?" I clutched my hands together to stop them from shaking. "Why did you bring me here?" "I told you. You were starving." He looked at the empty tray. "Good. You ate." "What do you want from me?" I hated how weak I sounded. After Roy, I knew what men like this wanted. They didn't give away soup for free. "Right now?" He tilted his head. "I want you to take a shower. You'll find clothes in the closet. They'll be too big, but they're clean. Then, I want you to sleep." "And then?" "Then we'll see." He didn't smile. He didn't move toward me. He just watched. "I want to leave," I said, trying to sound brave. "You tried that," he replied, his voice flat. "It didn't work out." "You can't keep me here." "I'm not," he said. "The front door is downstairs, but I wouldn't recommend it. Not tonight." "Why?" He didn't answer, and he just looked at Marco. "Marco, tell her." The driver, Marco, spoke for the first time. His voice was a gravelly bass. "Roy Banner." I stopped breathing. He put the word out. He's looking for you, Marco continued, his face impassive. Offer $500 to anyone who grabs you. We found 3 of his guys circling the block where you parked your car. They're still out there. They watched you go into the market. They were waiting for you to come out. I swayed, gripping the bedpost. They had been there. They had been watching me while the owner shook me. If Luca hadn't stepped in... How do you know all this? I stammered. Luca finally spoke. It's my business to know what happens in my city. Sabrina, especially when someone is offering money for a person I just claimed. Claimed? The word hung in the air, cold and heavy. I'm not yours, I whispered. He didn't react. It was as if I hadn't spoken. Get some sleep. You're safe here. No one will get through the gates. He turned. Marco backed out of the doorway. Wait, I called out, my voice cracking. Luca paused, looking back over his shoulder. My car, it's all I have. Dark blue Honda, 1998, license plate 6 Delta Victor 229. It's in the garage downstairs. Marco picked it up an hour ago. He knew my plate number. He'd done a background check. He had learned everything in the few hours I'd been unconscious. The depth of his control, the speed of his information was terrifying. He closed the door, leaving me alone in the silent, luxurious room. I didn't shower. I didn't trust the water running to cover any sound. I didn't trust the clothes in the closet. I sat on the edge of the bed for what felt like hours, my mind racing. He wasn't Roy. Roy was chaotic, insecure, his violence fueled by alcohol and jealousy. This man, Luca, was something else. He was cold, controlled, and his power was quiet and absolute. He hadn't touched me. He hadn't threatened me. He had simply stated facts. You're protected. You're safe here. But it felt like the most dangerous place I'd ever been. Sleep was impossible. I waited until the house was deep in the silence of the early morning. Maybe 3 or 4 I couldn't stay. I didn't care about Roy's men. I had to get out. Being owned by one monster to be safe from another wasn't safety. It was just a different cage. I crept to the door and opened it. The hallway was empty. I slipped out, my bare feet sinking into the thick carpet runner. I moved toward the stairs, a massive, curving staircase that led down into a dark foyer. I saw the front door. It was huge, made of dark wood with frosted glass panels. Freedom. I was halfway down the stairs when I heard a noise from the side. I froze, my heart in my mouth. They're still out there. It was Marco's voice. He was sitting in an armchair in the shadows of the living room, perfectly still. He hadn't been sleeping. He'd been waiting. 3 of them, in a black sedan, parked at the end of the street. They're watching the gates. I sagged against the banister. I have to go. Why? He asked. It wasn't an accusation, just a genuine question. I can't be here. I can't owe him. He doesn't do favors, Marco said, standing up. He was a mountain of a man. He doesn't expect you to pay him back. He told the owner you were protected. That's a statement. The boss's word is final. If he lets you walk out that door and Banner's rats get their hands on you, his word means nothing. That's not how this works. So I'm a prisoner? You're a problem, Marco said, not unkindly. But you're his problem now, which means you're not allowed to be anyone else's. I felt trapped. He was right. I couldn't even make it to the gate. A car engine roared to life outside. Headlights swept across the frosted glass of the front door. Marco was at the door in an instant, peering through the glass. Damn it, they're coming. What? My blood ran cold. They're not waiting. They're at the gate. 3 of them. Marco spoke into a small radio on his shoulder. Gate breach. 3 tangos. Front drive. It happened so fast. I heard shouting from outside. Then I heard sounds. A sickening, wet thud. A muffled yell. Cut off short. A crack. Like a baseball bat hitting a side of beef. It was over in less than 30 seconds. The front door opened. 2 men I hadn't seen before, dressed in dark clothes, nodded at Marco. It's done, one of them said. Message sent. Clean? Marco asked. Broken. All of them. They'll be able to crawl back to Banner by sunrise. They won't be back." The man looked past Marco and saw me, cowering on the stairs. He nodded respectfully. His gaze sliding away as if I hadn't seen him, they disappeared back into the night. Marco turned back to me. His face was calm. Brutal precision. That's what it was. Not a fight, an extermination. My stomach heaved. I ran back up the stairs, into the guest room, and was violently sick in the pristine marble bathroom. They hadn't saved me. They had enforced a boundary. I was property, and Roy's men had been trespassing. I was shaking so hard I could barely stand. I rinsed my mouth, my reflection staring back at me, a pale, terrified ghost in a rich man's mirror. I couldn't stay in the bedroom. It was too quiet, too soft. I didn't know what I needed. I walked back downstairs. Marco was gone, the foyer was empty. The house was silent again, as if the violence outside had been a dream. I found a living room, dominated by a massive, cold fireplace and dark leather sofas. I curled up on the smallest couch, pulling my knees to my chest, my arms wrapped around my legs. I didn't mean to fall asleep. I just meant to close my eyes for a second. But the food, the warmth, and the sheer emotional exhaustion pulled me under. I woke to the sense of being watched. I didn't open my eyes. I kept my breathing even. My heart was pounding, but I lay perfectly still. Someone was in the room. I could feel the weight of their gaze. I risked a look, cracking my eyelids just a fraction. He was there, Luca Moretti. He was standing by the cold fireplace, a glass of dark liquid in his hand. He wasn't looking at the fireplace. He was looking at me, asleep or pretending to be on his couch. His face, in the dim light of the moon coming through the tall windows, was unreadable. But it wasn't the look Roy gave me when I was sleeping, that hot, possessive, hungry look that made my skin crawl even in unconsciousness. This was different, It was analytic. It was the look of a man trying to solve a problem he hadn't anticipated. He watched me for a long, silent minute. I saw his brow furrow, just slightly. It wasn't anger, it wasn't lust. It was something else, something unfamiliar. Concern. He was worried. The realization was so strange, so alien, that I almost sat up. This man, who had men break other men's bones on his front lawn, was looking at me with concern. He turned, set the glass down, and walked silently out of the room. I let out the breath I'd been holding. I stayed on the couch, my mind reeling. The silence of the house was different now. It wasn't empty. It was charged. I was safer here, in the lion's den, than I had been in my entire life, and that was the most terrifying thought of all. Later, I woke up again. The sky outside was still a deep, pre-dawn purple. My mouth was sandpaper. I needed water. I remembered the kitchen. I remembered the soup. I slid off the couch. The wood floors were cold under my bare feet. I tiptoed, following the memory of where Marco had come from, until I found a massive, dark kitchen. Stainless steel counters gleamed in the moonlight. I stopped dead. He was there, too. Luca was sitting at a large island, a single dim light on above him. He was in his shirt sleeves, his back to me. He didn't turn. "There's water in the fridge," he said, his voice quiet in the stillness. I flinched, not expecting him to know I was there. I stayed frozen by the doorway. He sighed, a tired sound. He stood, walked to the enormous refrigerator and opened it. He pulled out a glass pitcher of water, took a clean glass from a cabinet, and poured. He turned and faced me. He held the glass out. I stared at it. This was a test. Everything was a test. I took a hesitant step forward, then another. I was acutely aware of my bare feet, my dirty clothes, the tremor in my hands. He just waited, patient as stone. I stopped in front of him, close enough to smell that faint, expensive scent from the market, leather and something clean, like soap. I reached for the glass. My fingers brushed his. It was like a static shock, a jolt of warmth that shot straight up my arm. His skin was calloused, warm. I snatched the glass, my eyes wide, expecting him to grab my hand. He didn't. He just let go, his hand dropping to his side. He didn't say, "You're welcome, He didn't say, "Be careful." He didn't say anything. I lifted the glass and drank, my eyes never leaving his. The water was cold and clean, and it was the best thing I had ever tasted. I drank the whole thing. When I was done, I lowered the glass, my hand shaking. He just nodded, once, a tiny, almost imperceptible gesture. I turned and walked out of the kitchen, back to the couch, my heart hammering a new, strange rhythm. No words had been spoken, no promises made, but as I curled up on the sofa, I knew I wasn't in a cage. Not really, I didn't know what this was, but as I closed my eyes, the deep, dark fear that had been my only companion for a year finally loosened its grip. I was still terrified, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the man in the dark. I was afraid of the one who had just given me a glass of water. I woke up stiff, cold and ashamed, still curled on the sofa in the massive, silent living room. My neck ached. Morning light, gray and weak, was pouring through the tall windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The house was quiet, but it felt different from the dead of night silence. It was the quiet of a place holding its breath, waiting to begin its day. I felt disgusting. The grime of the streets, the alley, the terror of the night. It was all still on me. A second sticky skin. My hair was plastered to my head, and my clothes smelled of sweat and fear. I had to move. I couldn't be found here, like a stray dog that had crept inside for warmth. I slipped off the couch, my bare feet silent on the cold wood floor. I padded back to the grand staircase, my heart in my throat. Every shadow seemed to hold a guard, another man like Marco, but no one was there. I was alone. I crept up the stairs, back to the guest room I had fled hours before. I pushed the door open. The room was just as I'd left it, except for two things. The bed, which I hadn't slept in, was perfectly made. Folded neatly on top of the plush comforter was a small pile of clothes, a pair of simple black leggings, a soft, long-sleeved gray tunic, and, in small, discreet packages, socks and underwear. On the bedside table, where the empty soup bowl had been, sat a tray, a white porcelain mug steamed, smelling of rich, dark coffee. Beside it was a plate with 2 pieces of thick, buttered toast and a small bowl of sliced apples. I stared. It wasn't a peace offering. It felt like an instruction. Get clean, get dressed, eat. My stomach betrayed me with a loud, hollow growl. I was still hungry. I was always hungry. I locked the door, a flimsy, useless gesture, but it made me feel marginally safer. I went into the adjoining bathroom, a palace of marble and glass that was bigger than my last apartment. I turned on the shower, and the water that instantly gushed out was hot, so hot it steamed up the glass. I stripped off my filthy clothes, leaving them in a sad, crumpled pile. I stepped into the water, and it was so hot it stung. I scrubbed my skin raw with a bar of soap that smelled like sandalwood and something clean, something I couldn't name. I washed my hair twice, watching the suds run gray with dirt down the drain. I cried, silent. Hot tears that mixed with the shower water. They weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of humiliation. I was being hosed down, deloused, made presentable for the man who had bought me for $70. When I stepped out, my skin was pink and tingling. I dried myself with a towel so thick and soft it felt like a hug. I felt scrubbed, but not clean. I felt erased. I put on new clothes. They were simple, unbranded, but the fabric was softer than anything I'd ever owned. They fit, almost perfectly. I went back into the bedroom and ate the toast, devoured the apples. I drank the coffee, which was strong and black and bitter. It woke me up. It sharpened the edges of my fear. I had to face him. I went downstairs. I found him in a room that was walled with books. Sunlight streamed in, and he was sitting in a leather armchair. Not reading, but looking out the window at the expansive, perfectly manicured grounds. He had his back to me. He was dressed for the day, in dark trousers and a crisp white shirt, the sleeves rolled up to his forearms. He spoke without turning. "You're clean." I stopped, my hands knotting at my waist. "Yes." "Good." He stood and faced me. In the daylight, he was even more imposing. His eyes were the color of a storm cloud. "Is the food okay?" I nodded. "Thank you for all of this, but I have to leave. I can't pay you back." "I'm not running a hotel," he said, his voice flat. He walked over to a large, polished desk. "And I'm not running a charity." This was it, the other shoe, the price. I braced myself. "I have a housekeeper," he said. "Mrs. Petrov. She's been with my family for 30 years. She's getting older. The house is large. She could use an extra pair of hands." I just stared at him. "What?" "Dusting, polishing silver, laundry, helping in the kitchen. Simple work." He looked at me, his gaze analytical. "You'll have the room you slept in. You'll have food. You'll earn a wage, a small one, paid out in cash every Friday." My mind was reeling. "A job. You're offering me a job." "I'm offering you a solution," he corrected me. "I told the world you're protected. That's easier to do when you're inside these gates. This way. You're not a guest. You're not a prisoner." He paused, his eyes holding mine. "And I don't like debts. This way. You're earning your keep. We're even." It didn't feel even. It felt like a different kind of chain. One wrapped in soft clothes and warm food. But what choice did I have? Out there was Roy. Out there was starvation. In here was this. "Roy's men are still looking for you," he added, as if reading my thoughts. "They're angry. Their friends went home with broken bones. They'll be looking harder now." My stomach dropped. "Okay." The word was a whisper. Yes. Okay. Good." He nodded once, as if closing a business deal. "Marco is in the garage. He'll escort you to your car. Get whatever you need from it. He'll bring you back." "My car? It's really here?" "I don't lie. Sabrina." He was right. My dusty, dented Honda was parked in a massive underground garage, nestled between a black Rolls-Royce and a sleek silver sports car. It looked like a junkyard refugee. Marco stood by, silent, while I retrieved my backpack, which held my only other pair of jeans, a few t-shirts, my toothbrush, and a worn photograph of me and my sister, Daniela, taken a lifetime ago. That was it, my entire life in one small backpack. I started work the same day, Mrs. Petrov was exactly as I'd pictured, a stern, sharp-eyed woman from some Eastern European country, with her gray hair pulled into a severe bun. She spoke with a thick accent and looked at me with open suspicion. "So, you are the girl from the street," she said, her eyes raking over me. "My name is Sabrina." "Your name is Helper," she sniffed. "Come. The silver needs polishing, and you will not be slow." The work was hard. It was mindless, humbling, back-breaking labor. I scrubbed floors on my hands and knees. I polished an endless supply of heavy, ornate silver. I dusted rooms that no one ever seemed to enter. I folded laundry that smelled of that same clean, expensive soap. But at the end of the day, my muscles ached with a good, honest exhaustion. Mrs. Petrov would nod curtly and tell me to go to the kitchen, where a plate of food would be waiting for me. I ate alone, at a small table, while Mrs. Petrov watched the news on a small television. It was a routine. It was quiet. And for the first time in so long, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. I wasn't listening for footsteps. I wasn't hungry. I barely saw Luca. He was a ghost in his own home. He'd leave before I came downstairs and return long after I'd retreated to my room. The house was his fortress, and I was just a new, insignificant part of the staff. A week passed, then two. I was dusting the long, cavernous front hallway when the doorbell rang. Marco, who was always nearby, opened it. A man I'd never seen before strode in. He was older than Luca, maybe in his late 50s, and wore a suit so sharp it could have cut glass. He had a thin, severe face and eyes like chips of ice. He radiated an energy that was completely different from Luca's, not a quiet, contained power, but a restless, agitated authority. He saw me, on my hands and knees with a dust rag, and stopped. "You?" he said. It wasn't a question. I froze, my rag in my hand. "Sir?" He looked at me with a cold, undisguised disdain. He brought a mouse into the lion's den. Curious. He didn't wait for a reply, just swept past me, calling out, "Luca, we need to talk." Luca's study door opened. "Dante, you're early." "We have business. Luca, now." The man, Dante, walked into the study, and Luca closed the door behind him. I tried to keep working, but my hands were shaking. A mouse in the lion's den. That's what I was. I moved on, dusting the tables farther down the hall. I couldn't help it. I could hear them. The voices were muffled by the thick wooden door, but the tone was clear. Dante's voice was sharp, rising and falling in an angry, percussive rhythm. I couldn't make out the words, just the raw displeasure. Then I heard Luca's voice, a low, cutting rumble. It was the sound of a large engine idling, a promise of speed and power. The argument was about me. I knew it. I could feel it in my bones. I was the mouse. I was the curious decision. I was the thing that had upset the order of this house. I fled. I went to the kitchens, where Mrs. Petrov set me to work scrubbing pots, and the rhythmic, metallic scrape was loud enough to drown out the sound of the men who were deciding my fate. That night, Mrs. Petrov told me, "You will not eat in the kitchen." My stomach twisted. Am I leaving?" "Mister, Moretti requests your presence for dinner, in the main dining room, at 8. She looked me up and down. "Go, make yourself presentable." Presentable. I had my 2 pairs of jeans, my old t-shirts, and the leggings and tunic he had given me. I put on the leggings and tunic, washed my face, and brushed my hair until it was smooth. I walked into the dining room at 8 o'clock on the dot. The room was vast, with a table that could have seated 30 people. Luca was at the head of it. A single place was set for me, halfway down on his right. It felt like I was a mile away from him. I sat. A man I didn't know served me a plate of food, some kind of fish and roasted vegetables. It smelled divine. The silence was deafening, broken only by the click of silverware on china. "How is the work?" Luca asked, his voice echoing slightly in the large room. "It's fine, sir." He looked up, pinning me with his gaze. "Luca. My name is Luca." "Luca," I whispered. It felt strange on my tongue. "Mrs. Petrov says you are a hard worker." I was surprised. "She did?" "She did. She also said you broke a wine glass yesterday." My face burned. "I'm sorry. It slipped." "It's just a glass, Sabrina." We ate in silence for a few more minutes. The food was delicious, but I could barely taste it. I felt like I was on display, a specimen under a microscope. "Why?" The word just fell out of my mouth. He paused, his fork halfway to his mouth. "Why what?" "Why me, that day in the store? Why did you help me?" He put his fork down and leaned back, studying me. "You are hungry." "Other people are hungry," I insisted, my voice gaining a desperate edge. "You can't save all of them." "They weren't in front of me, Ozzy," he said, simply, as if that explained everything. I pushed my vegetables around on my plate. This place, this life. I don't belong here. Luca, I'm a mess. My whole life is a mess. I'm not like you." "I know," he said, his voice soft. The quiet admission made something in my chest crack. The confession I'd been holding in, the shame that defined me, just spilled out. I had a sister. Daniela, she's younger than me. When she left us, I was supposed to take care of her. I was only 16, but I was the oldest. I was supposed to be the adult. My eyes stung, but I refused to cry. I couldn't do it. I met Roy. He seemed so nice, so much older. He said he'd take care of me, and I ran away with him. I left her. I just left her in the foster care system. I haven't seen her in 6 years. Luca, I don't even know if she's okay. I don't know where she is. I'm trash. The man in the store was right. The silence that followed was heavy. Absolute. I was sure I had just sealed my fate. I had shown him the rotten, broken thing I was. He would tell me to leave in the morning. He was quiet for a long time, staring at his plate. When he finally spoke, his voice was so low I almost didn't hear it. I was a hungry kid too. Sabrina. I looked up, stunned. His gaze was distant, lost in a memory that was clearly painful. My mother. She worked in a bakery on First Street. We lived in a one-room apartment above it. She'd bring home the day-old bread, the ones that were too stale to sell. Sometimes. That's all we had for dinner. He clenched his jaw. Some people, they think hunger is a choice, a weakness to be despised. They're wrong. It's just a reality. He didn't say anything else. He didn't tell me what happened to his mother. He didn't elaborate. He just picked up his fork and took a bite of fish, the wall of control sliding back into place. But he had opened a door, just a crack. He had shown me. For 1 second, the person behind the suit, he had seen my shame, and instead of showing me disgust, he had shown me his own. The atmosphere in the house changed a few days later. It was subtle, but I felt it. The quiet, sterile sanctuary I had just started to get used to now felt like a fortress on high alert. I saw 2 new men at the front gate when I was weeding a flower bed out front. They weren't the usual house guards. These men were harder. Their faces were flat and emotionless, and they wore suits that looked bulky, like they were wearing vests underneath. Marco, who had been a quiet, almost comforting shadow, was suddenly always there. When I was dusting the foyer, he was in the hall. When I took a bag of trash out to the bins, he was by the kitchen door, watching the tree line. The new tension was a steel wire pulled taut through the house. I finally found the courage to ask him, "Marco, is something wrong?" I was polishing a banister, and he was standing at the foot of the stairs. He looked at me, his face an unreadable mask. "Just updating protocols, Miss..." The word "miss" felt new and colder than Sabrina. Did he find me?" I whispered, my heart thumping. "Is it Roy?" Marco's dark eyes met mine. "You're safe here, Sabrina. The boss won't let anything happen to you." The boss, not Luca. The boss, the man who had argued with Dante, the man who had updated protocols. The old fear, the one I had almost forgotten, came rushing back. I wasn't an employee. I was a possession. I wasn't being protected. I was being guarded. I was the reason the walls were higher. The reason new, hard-eyed men were at the gates. I was a burden, a problem, a mouse in a lion's den. I couldn't stay. I couldn't be the reason this house was on lockdown. I couldn't be the reason he was in danger. Mrs. Petrov had given me my first week's pay, in cash, tucked into a small white envelope, $300. It was more money than I'd had at one time in over a year. It was enough for a bus ticket, enough to disappear. That night, I waited until the house was in its deepest silence. I packed my old backpack. I put on the original clothes I had arrived in. The dirty jeans, the worn-out t-shirt, they felt like my skin. I left the soft gray tunic and the leggings folded neatly on the bed. I slipped out of my room. Leaving the door open, I crept down the stairs, my sneakers silent on the thick carpet. The foyer was empty. Marco wasn't there. The living room was dark. I made it to the front door. The heavy lock turned smoothly, silently, under my hand. I pulled the door open, slipped outside, and closed it gently behind me. I was out. The night air was cold and clean. The moon was a bright sliver, illuminating the long, curving driveway. It felt like a mile long. I ran, keeping to the shadows of the tall, sculpted hedges. I finally reached the gates. They were massive, black wrought iron, and absolutely, unequivocally closed. A small, reinforced guardhouse was set just inside, and I could see the 2 new, hard-eyed men inside, watching a bank of security monitors. There was no way out. I sank down on the cold pavement, hiding behind a large stone pillar. I was trapped. I was a prisoner. I had run from Roy's cage only to end up in this beautiful, gilded one. I buried my face in my hands and I cried. Not loud, noisy sobs, but the silent, racking, hopeless kind of crying that comes when you realize you have no moves left. "I thought I told you." The voice came from the darkness right behind me. I screamed, scrambling to my feet. "Luca?" He was standing not 10 feet away, dark and solid as a shadow. He wasn't in a suit. He was in dark gray sweatpants and a plain black t-shirt. He was barefoot. He must have seen me on a camera. I was just getting some air." I lied, my voice thick with tears. I frantically wiped my face. "With your backpack," he stated. It wasn't a question. I was caught. The humiliation was so intense it burned away my fear. All that was left was a cold, bitter anger. "You can't keep me here," I seethed, pulling my backpack straps tight. "This isn't protection. It's a cage. I'm a burden. I heard you. I heard you arguing with that man. Dante, I see the new guards. This is all because of me. I won't be the reason you have a war. Just let me go." He was silent, just watching me fall apart. Then he took a step closer. I flinched back. "Don't—" He stopped. "Do you think these gates are to keep you in?" "Aren't they?" I spat. "They're to keep him out," he said, his voice a low growl. "Roy, his new friends, anyone who thinks they can touch what's mine." "I'm not yours," I yelled, the word echoing in the quiet night. He took another step, and another. He was right in front of me now. So close I had to crane my neck to look up at him. The moonlight cast hard shadows across his face, making his eyes look like black pits. "I am a problem. Luca, a mouse. Just let me go. I'll take my chances. I'm good at running." "You're not," he said, his voice rough and quiet. "You were starving in an alley. You were about to be grabbed by 3 junkies who would have sold you for parts. You're a terrible runner, Sabrina." The truth of it hit me, and all the fight just evaporated. My shoulders slumped. Fresh tears spilled, hot and fast, down my cheeks. I looked down at the ground, unable to meet his gaze. He reached out. I was too tired, too defeated to flinch. He didn't grab me. He placed 2 fingers under my chin, his touch surprisingly gentle. He lifted my face, forcing my eyes to meet his. His gaze was electric, intense, burning through all my defenses. "You don't have to run anymore." The words, his voice, the look in his eyes, it all combined to steal the breath from my lungs. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command. It was a promise. It was the end of the world I had known. I just stared at him, my heart hammering against my ribs. He was still holding my chin, his thumb stroking the line of my jaw. A small, soothing motion that was terrifyingly intimate. "Sabrina," he whispered. My name sounded like a prayer or a curse. He leaned in. It was slow. He was giving me time to say no, to pull away, to run. I couldn't. I was paralyzed, caught in the gravity of him. His lips touched mine. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It wasn't soft or tentative. It was a kiss of possession, of statement. It was full of all the control, the tension, and the coiled power I had felt from him since that first moment in the market. It was demanding, consuming, and it tasted of whiskey and the cold night air. My hands came up, not to push him away, but to press flat against the solid, warm wall of his chest, and I was kissing him back. I was clinging to him, my fingers curling into his shirt. For one insane second, all the fear, all the hunger, all the running, it just dissolved. There was nothing but this man, this solid, dangerous, impossible man, and that thought, that feeling of surrender, was what finally broke the spell. I gasped, tearing my mouth from his. I shoved hard against his chest. "No!" He let go instantly. He stepped back, his chest heaving, his eyes black and furious in the darkness. "I can't," I panted, trembling from head to toe. I'm not. This isn't. I'm not one of your things." "Is that what you think this is?" He shot back, his voice a raw, angry rasp. "I don't know what it is," I cried, "but you give me a job. You give me clothes. You feed me. You don't get to. I am not for sale. Luca." I didn't wait for him to answer. I turned and I ran. I ran back up the long, dark driveway, my backpack bouncing against my spine. I ran as if Roy himself were at my heels. I didn't look back to see if he was following me. I burst through the front door, slammed it shut, and ran up the stairs to my room. I slammed that door too, and fumbled with the lock, my hands shaking so badly it took 3 tries. I slid down the wood, my back against the door, and sat on the floor, gasping for air. My heart was trying to beat its way out of my chest. My lips were burning, tingling. I could still taste him. I sat there for an hour, maybe more, until the shaking stopped. Finally, my legs unsteady, I stood up and crawled into the bed. I was still terrified. But it was a new fear, a different kind of fear. It wasn't the fear of being hurt. It was the fear of, I didn't even know. I lay in the dark, staring at the door. After a long, long time, I got up. I walked back to the door. My hand hovered over the lock. I turned it. I heard the soft click as the bolt slid back. I opened the door, just a crack, an inch of dark hallway. It wasn't for him, it was for me. For the first time in my life, it wasn't a choice made from fear of who might get in. He had stopped. The second I said no, he had stopped. He wasn't Roy. I didn't know what he was. I left the door cracked open, a silent, confusing admission that I was no longer a prisoner, but I still had no idea where I was. The week after the kiss was a special kind of hell. It was a silence so loud it screamed. I went back to my duties. I polished the silver until my reflection was a distorted, haunted mask. I scrubbed floors until my knees were raw. I reported to Mrs. Petrov, who watched me with her sharp, knowing eyes, her lips pressed into a thin, neutral line. She didn't ask. I didn't tell. Luca was a phantom. He had pulled away completely. I ate my meals in the kitchen again, without being told. It was a retreat, a silent admission of my place. I was the help. I was the girl who had foolishly, stupidly, kissed the boss. I had crossed a line, and now he was putting me back in my box. But something in the house was different. The tension I'd felt before was now a low, electric hum. I saw Marco all the time, his hand never far from the radio on his shoulder. I saw Dante, the cold-eyed older man, sweep in and out, his face always a mask of thunder. They were meeting. They were planning. And I was the problem. I was the disturbance. The shame was so thick it was hard to breathe. I had mistaken a moment of power for a moment of connection. He had told me I didn't have to run, and then kissed me. And it wasn't a promise. It was a branding. But something else was happening, too, deep inside me. The hunger was gone. For the first time in my adult life, I was eating 3 meals a day. I was sleeping in a safe, quiet room. The constant high-pitched whine of survival that had been the soundtrack to my life for years was fading. My hands had stopped shaking. I'd look in the mirror after my shower, wrapped in a thick, soft towel. The girl looking back wasn't the same one who had stolen a loaf of bread. My face had filled out. The dark, hollowed-out circles under my eyes were fading to a pale, bruised purple. My hair, washed and clean, was thick and heavy. I was gaining weight. I was gaining substance. One evening, Mrs. Petrov stopped me as I was heading to my room. "These are not good," she said, gesturing to my old, threadbare jeans. "You look like a field worker, mister. Moretti does not like untidiness." She handed me a credit card, a sleek, black piece of plastic with his name on it. "Marco will drive you tomorrow. You will buy clothes, things that fit, things that are not. Sad." I was stunned. I can't accept this." "It is not a request," she said, her accent sharp. "It is an instruction. Do not embarrass him, or me." The next day, Marco drove me to a part of Coleridge City I had only ever seen in magazines. The boutiques were small, their windows showing off single dresses on faceless mannequins. I was terrified. "I don't belong here, Marco." "The boss said to take you. So, we're here. The card works." I went into one store, just one. I bought 3 pairs of dark, simple trousers, 2 soft cashmere sweaters, a pair of flat, leather boots. I bought new underwear. I bought a real coat, a thick, wool one that was dark blue. The total came to more than I had earned in the last 6 months at the diner. I signed his name, my hand trembling. When I got back, I put the new clothes on. The fabric was soft against my skin. The fit was perfect. I looked in the mirror, and for a second, I didn't recognize myself. I looked solid. I looked like someone who mattered. This was the armor he was giving me. The thought was a cold spike in my chest. He was dressing up his new acquisition. The silence between us stretched for 2 more days. I was going mad with it. I felt him in the house, a dark, brooding presence, but our paths never crossed. He was avoiding me. The rejection was worse than any cruelty Roy had ever inflicted. Roy's abuse was hot and loud. This was cold and silent. That night, I couldn't sleep. The new clothes felt like a costume. The safety of the room felt like a lie. I needed to know. I needed to hear him say it. It was a mistake. You're just the help. Get back in your place. I went downstairs. I knew where he would be. The house was dark, but a line of light seeped from under the study door. I didn't knock. I just turned the handle and pushed it open. He was there, but he wasn't working. He was standing by the tall window, staring out into the blackness of the lawn. He wasn't wearing a suit, just dark trousers and a white shirt, unbuttoned at the neck. A glass of whiskey was on the desk beside him, untouched. He turned when I entered. His face was a mask of exhaustion and something else. A deep, simmering anger that had nothing to do with me. "You should be in bed," he said, his voice rough. "I can't," I whispered. My heart was a fist in my throat. "We have to talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about. I crossed a line. It won't happen again." It was exactly what I was afraid of, a dismissal, a regret. "It won't happen again," I repeated, and my voice cracked. "Because you regret it. Because I'm... What? Help? The stray you brought in? Was it just an impulse?" He turned his back to me, gripping the window frame. "It doesn't matter what it was. It was a mistake." "A mistake." The word was poison. "Because I'm not good enough. Because I'm damaged goods. Just like Roy said. Is that it? You polished me up. Put me in new clothes. But I'm still the girl from the gutter." He turned around, his eyes flashing, that dangerous energy I'd seen in the market suddenly filling the room. "You don't know what you're talking about. Sabrina, go to bed." "No!" I took a step toward him, my hands clenched. "I won't. I won't be ignored. I won't be your dirty little secret. I need to know what I am to you." "What are you?" he shot back, his voice low and dangerous. "You're a complication." "A complication?" It was a slap. "So that's all? I'm just a problem. I'm just another thing you have to protect, aren't I? Like this house, like your cars, like your reputation." My voice broke. The tears I'd been holding back for a week finally burning my eyes. Am I just another item on your inventory, Luca?" He moved so fast I didn't even have time to flinch. He crossed the room in 2 strides and was in front of me, his hands landing on the desk on either side of my hips, caging me in. He leaned down, his face inches from mine. He was furious, but it was a cold, controlled rage. "You think you're an item?" he snarled, his voice a low rasp. "You think you're like this house? This house is wood and stone. It can be rebuilt. My cars are steel and glass. They can be replaced." He leaned closer, his forehead almost touching mine. His gray eyes were on fire, and I could see every speck of silver and black. "You," he whispered, and the word was raw. You are the only thing in this entire godforsaken world I would bleed for. The air left my lungs, the confession torn from him with such violence, hung in the air between us. I stared at him, at the agony in his eyes. He wasn't rejecting me. He wasn't pushing me away because he was disgusted. He was pushing me away because he was terrified. This man, this pillar of power and control, was terrified. Of me. You're the only one I'd bleed for. The words echoed in the silence. He hadn't said, I love you. He hadn't said, I want you. He had said something truer and darker and more absolute. He hadn't moved. He was still pinning me, his knuckles white on the desk. He was breathing hard, as if he'd just run a mile. He was watching me, waiting for me to run, to scream, to shatter. I did the only thing I could. I lifted my hand slowly, my fingers trembling. I didn't touch his face. I touched his chest, right over his heart. I could feel the frantic, heavy beat of it through the thin cotton of his shirt. It was pounding just as hard as mine. He flinched, like I'd burned him. His eyes closed. Sabrina, he breathed, a warning, a plea. I slid my hand up, over the hard muscle of his chest, up his neck, until my palm cupped his jaw. His skin was rough with stubble and so warm. I stood on my toes. I pressed my mouth to his. This time, it wasn't a branding. It wasn't a possession. It was a question. He was rigid, a statue of controlled violence. He didn't kiss me back. He was holding himself in. Every muscle in his body taut. He was afraid to break me. He thought he was the monster. I pulled back, just an inch, my lips still brushing his. It's okay, I whispered. I kissed him again, softer this time. I moved my hand from his jaw to the back of his neck, my fingers tangling in his short, thick hair. I wasn't demanding. I was offering. I was offering this new, stronger version of myself. I was offering the girl who wasn't hungry anymore, the girl who wasn't running. And he broke. A sound tore from his throat, a low groan of surrender, and his arms came around me. One hand splayed across my lower back, the other gripping my hair, and he kissed me back. It was everything. It was the hunger I'd felt in the market, the fear I'd felt at the gate, the anger I'd felt in this room. It was all of his control, all of his power, finally unleashed. But it wasn't cruel. It was desperate. He kissed me like a man dying of thirst, and I was water. He lifted me, his hands sliding under my legs, and I wrapped myself around him. He didn't stop kissing me. He carried me out of the study, through the dark, silent house, and up the grand staircase. I buried my face in his neck, breathing in the scent of him, that clean, expensive soap, and the faint, sharp tang of whiskey. He kicked open the door to his bedroom, not mine. The room was huge, dark and simple. A massive bed dominated the space. He didn't turn on a light. He just carried me to the bed and laid me down on the cool, crisp sheets. He stood over me for a second, a tall, dark silhouette against the moonlight. I could see the indecision, the war he was fighting with himself. This was the moment Roy would have torn at my clothes, the moment he would have taken. Luca just watched me. I sat up. I never broke his gaze. Slowly, my hands shaking, but not from fear. I pulled the soft cashmere sweater up and over my head. I let it fall to the floor. I was in my bra, my new, clean bra. His breath hitched. He didn't move. This was my choice, my body, my terms. I unhooked my bra and let it fall. I reached for the button on my trousers. Sabrina, his voice was broken glass. It's okay, I whispered again. I'm not afraid of you. Luca? That was the key. He knelt on the bed, moving over me, not like a predator, but like a worshiper. He kissed my mouth, softly now, a question. He kissed the corner of my jaw. He kissed the hollow of my throat. His lips were a trail of fire, but his hands were so gentle. He touched my skin, my shoulders, my arms, as if I were made of glass, as if he was memorizing me. There was no rush. There was no violence. There was just a slow, meticulous, tender exploration. He was unlearning every monster I had ever known. He undressed me slowly, and I undressed him. His skin was hot. His muscles coiled and hard under my hands. I felt the sharp, raised lines of scars on his back, a map of a life I couldn't imagine. He made love to me. There's no other word for it. It was a slow, deliberate, unhurried act of acceptance. He was teaching me, showing me, that intimacy could be quiet, that it could be tender, that it could be a place of safety, not a place of fear. And when it was over, I was the one who was crying, silent, hot tears, not of pain or shame, but of release. A lifetime of being used, of being broken, of being worthless was washing away. He didn't speak. He just held me. He gathered me close, his arms a fortress around me, and he kissed each tear from my face. He held me until my breathing evened out, until the shaking stopped, until I fell asleep in his arms. Safe. I woke up to the cold. The bed was empty. The sun was streaming through the windows, bright and unforgiving. The other side of the bed, where he had been, was cold. The sheets were rumpled, but he was gone. I sat up, pulling the sheet to my chest. Luca? The silence of the house was absolute. Panic, cold and familiar, seized my heart. I was a fool, a stupid, stupid fool. He'd gotten what he wanted, or maybe he'd woken up and realized his mistake. He'd woken up next to the girl from the gutter, the trash, and he'd been disgusted. He couldn't even stand to look at me in the daylight. I scrambled out of the bed, my body aching in a new, unfamiliar way. I gathered my clothes, which were pooled on the floor, and dressed, my hands fumbling. The shame was so intense I felt sick. I had misread everything. I had misread his desperation for affection. I had misread his tenderness for something more. He had bled for me? No, and he had just said the words. He had said what I needed to hear. I ran from his room, back to my own, back to my safe, small space. I needed to think. I needed to get out. But as I passed the top of the stairs, I heard voices, angry voices, from downstairs. Dante's voice, sharp and cutting. "It's a mistake, Luca. You're letting your emotions cloud your judgment. She's a weakness. Valente is using her to pull you out into the open. And you're walking right into it." I crept to the landing, hiding in the shadows, and looked down into the foyer. Luca was there, dressed in a black suit. He was checking a gun. The metallic click-clack of him sliding the magazine home echoed in the hall. Marco was beside him, also in a suit, a grim, hard look on his face. "It's not about her," Luca said, his voice flat and cold, colder than I'd ever heard it. "It's about the message. Roy Banner was in my club. He was with Valente's men. It was a test. If I don't answer, they own me." "And what answer is this?" Dante demanded. "You're meeting him? In the warehouses? It's a trap, you fool. He wants you to come for the boy. He's dangling the bait, and you're taking it." "I'm not going for the boy," Lucas said, sliding the gun into a holster under his arm. "I'm going to get him back, alive, and then I'm going to make Valente understand that what's mine is mine." "She has made you soft," Dante snarled. Lucas stopped. He turned and looked at his consigliere. "She has made me precise. I'm ending this. Not just for me. For her. She'll never have to look over her shoulder again. Valente gives me Banner, or I burn his entire operation to the ground by midnight." My blood turned to ice. He hadn't left me. He hadn't run away in disgust. He had left me to go to war, for me. "No?" The word was a choked sound from my throat. All three men froze. They looked up. I was exposed, clutching the banister, my face pale with terror. Luca's expression was unreadable, hard as granite. "Sabrina, go back to your room." "No," I said again, louder. I ran down the stairs, my feet bare. I ran right up to him, right past a shocked-looking Dante. I grabbed the front of his suit jacket. You can't do this. This doesn't concern you." "It only concerns me," I cried, my voice hysterical. "You're doing this because of me, because of that stupid animal." Roy, let him go. Luca, please. He's not worth it. I'm not worth it. Don't go. Please don't go. I was begging, clinging to him, my last pathetic defense against the violence of his world. He was unmoved. He took my hands, his grip firm and impersonal, and unpeeled my fingers from his jacket. It's already done, Sabrina. You're gonna get yourself killed for nothing. It's not nothing, he said, his voice quiet. It's the only thing. You need to be free of him, not just from the threat, from memory. This is the only way. By becoming him? I whispered, the horror dawning. By using violence and blood and backroom deals? How does that make you different? How does that make you better? His jaw tightened. His eyes went dead. You don't understand, he said. Oh, I understand, I spat, the fear turning to a hot, blinding rage. I understand perfectly. This isn't about me. This is about your pride, your power, your territory. I'm just the excuse. I'm just the property you're fighting over. Sabrina, that's not... You're just like him, I screamed, the words tearing out of me, raw and bloody. You're just like all the men who tried to own me. I hauled back my hand and I slapped him. The sound was sharp, ugly, like a gunshot in the silent grand foyer. It echoed. Dante sucked in a breath. Marco tensed, his hand going to his own weapon. Luca didn't move. He didn't even blink. He just stared at me, his head slightly turned from the force of the blow. A red mark was already blooming on his hard cheek. His eyes were black, empty. Whatever I had seen last night, the tenderness, the vulnerability, the man who would bleed for me, it was gone. I had killed it. There was nothing left but the Mafia boss. I was trembling, my hands stinging. I was terrified. He was going to hit me. He was going to... He turned his head, his gaze flat and dead. Then leave. The words were so quiet, so final. They were worse than any blow. What? I said, leave. He stepped back, away from me, and gestured to the front door. If that's what you think I am, then go. You're free. The gates are open. I stared at him, my chest hollow. He meant it. He wasn't going to stop me. He wasn't going to drag me back. He wasn't Roy. He was something far worse. He was a man who would let me walk away. Tears streamed down my face, but I didn't make a sound. I looked at Marco, who wouldn't meet my eyes. I looked at Dante, whose face was a mask of cold satisfaction. And I looked at Luca, who had already turned his back on me. He was adjusting his cufflink. Marco, he said, his voice all business. We're late. My heart shattered. I turned. On numb, shaking legs, I walked to the front door. I pulled it open. The morning air was cold. I walked out. I walked down the long, curving driveway. I didn't run. I just walked. Each step an eternity. I was waiting for him to call my name. I was waiting for Marco to grab my arm. Nothing. I reached the massive, black iron gates. As I approached, they slid open with a smooth, electronic hum. I stepped off his property, onto the public sidewalk. The gates slid shut behind me, the sound a final, heavy thud of dismissal. I was free. I was in my nice, new clothes with nowhere to go, and the man I had just... I didn't even have a word for it, was on his way to a war, and I had just told him he was a monster. I stood on the sidewalk, alone, as the black sedan, his car, swept past me from the driveway and disappeared down the street. He didn't even look. I walked, my feet, in the new, soft leather boots Luca had bought me, felt disconnected from my body. I walked past the manicured lawns and the tall, privacy-hedged homes of his neighborhood. The gates had closed behind me with a final, metallic thud, and the sound had sealed something in my chest, a cold, hard knot of despair. I had called him a monster. I had slapped him. I had thrown his protection back in his face, and he had done what Roy never would have. He had let me go. Freedom was a terrifying, empty void. I walked for over an hour, the sun rising in a gray, indifferent sky. The wealthy, quiet streets gave way to louder, dirtier ones. The smell of exhaust and old garbage replaced the scent of cut grass. I was back in the world I knew. I was back in the gutter. I had my backpack from the night I'd tried to run. I had the clothes on my back, and in my pocket, I had the small, white envelope from Mrs. Petrov. My week's wages, $300. It was a fortune. It was nothing. I had nowhere to go. My car was in his garage. My entire life, all 2 changes of clothes and a photograph, was in his house. No, not his house. The place I had just been exiled from. There was only one place I could think of. One place that was mine, if only by the memory of failure. The apartment. The one I'd been living in before the diner, before the firing, before Roy had kicked the door in and I'd fled to my car. The landlord, a sour-faced man named Mr. Kopecki, had my deposit. Maybe he would let me have the room back, just for one night, just until I could think. I took a city bus, my new wool coat a stark, clean beacon in a sea of stained parkas and worn-out jackets. People stared at me. I looked like I belonged, and I looked like I didn't. All at once, I clutched the envelope in my pocket. The building was in the lower south, not far from the market where Luca had found me. It smelled the same, boiled cabbage, damp plaster, and the faint, sweet, sick scent of mildew. It was the smell of rock bottom. I walked up the 3 flights of stairs, the linoleum crunching under my boots. My old apartment was 3B. I had the key in my backpack, a useless piece of metal. I was sure Kopecki would have changed the lock. I stood in front of the door. The paint was peeling. I could see the splintered wood around the knob where Roy had broken in before. I'm so stupid. What am I doing here? He'll be looking for me here. But where else was there? I slid the key in. It turned. He hadn't changed the lock. I pushed the door open, my heart a cold stone in my stomach. Mr. Kopecki? The small, 1-room apartment was dark, the single window's blinds drawn. It was empty. But the air was wrong. It didn't smell like dust and mildew. It smelled lived in. It smelled of stale beer, cigarettes, and sweat. It smelled like him. Well. My blood evaporated. I turned so fast I stumbled. He was sitting in the corner, in a shadowed alcove I hadn't seen. He was sitting on an upturned milk crate, as if he'd been waiting. Roy Banner. "Look at you," he said, his voice a greasy, triumphant drawl. He stood up, and my stomach dropped. He was thinner than I remembered. His skin sallow, his eyes a little too bright. He looked like a cornered rat, all jittery energy and yellow teeth. "You're a sight, Sabrina, a real princess." "Roy?" I whispered. I backed up, my hand fumbling for the doorknob behind me. He moved, faster than I'd expected, and slammed the door shut, his hand landing on the wood just inches from my head. I screamed. He laughed, still so jumpy. "I missed that." He leaned in, and I recoiled, my back hitting the door. He smelled awful, like he hadn't bathed in a week. "What do you want, Roy?" "What do I want?" He laughed again, a wheezing sound. "I want what's mine. You. You think you can just run off with some rich greaseball and forget about me?" "I'm not yours," I hissed, my body trembling so hard I could barely stand. "Yeah, you are." He reached out and grabbed a handful of my new cashmere sweater. "Look at this. Soft. You think you're better than me now? In your fancy new clothes?" He yanked the fabric. "You're still trash. Sabrina, you're just dressed up. Let go of me." "Or what? You gonna call your new boyfriend?" He shoved me. Hard. I stumbled forward into the empty room. "I don't think he's coming. I heard you had a little fight." My heart stopped. How do you know that?" "I got new friends. Baby, big friends." He puffed out his chest. "Friends who don't like your boyfriend very much. Friends who tell me things, like when his pretty little pet runs away from home." "Valente. Nico Valente. He was working for Valente. This was all a trap." "He's gonna find me," I said, trying to sound brave. "He's gonna kill you." Roy's face darkened. "He ain't gonna find you, and he ain't gonna kill me. He's busy. He's got a war to fight, and I'm not even on his list." He advanced on me, his eyes glittering. "But you know what? He'll be happy I have you. Maybe he'll pay me to take you off his hands. He'll throw you out like the trash you are. Sabrina, you wait and see. You're just a toy, and he's tired of playing with you." "You're wrong," I whispered. "Am I?" He lunged, and I wasn't fast enough. He grabbed my wrist, his fingers digging in, a cruel, familiar grip. "You always like to argue." He twisted. Pain, white-hot and blinding, shot up my arm. I screamed, a raw, terrified sound. "You're going to be quiet now," he snarled, raising his other hand. "You're going to learn your place again." The door didn't open. It exploded. The entire frame splintered. The door flew off its hinges, slamming into the opposite wall with a sound like a cannon shot. Roy froze, his hand still raised, his grip still crushing my wrist. Luca Moretti stood in the ruined doorway. He wasn't the man from the house. He wasn't the tender lover from last night. He wasn't the cold businessman who had told me to leave. This was something else. This was a primal force. His suit was rumpled, his tie gone, his eyes were black, void of all light, all reason, all humanity. They were fixed on Roy's hand, wrapped around my arm. "Let her go." His voice was not a voice. It was a rumble. It was the sound of gravel and death. Roy, to my shock, didn't immediately let go. He was terrified, but his new, borrowed arrogance held, "You don't own her. Moretti. She's mine. And my boss." Luca didn't wait for him to finish the sentence. He moved. It wasn't a fight. It was a judgment. He crossed the room in one stride and his hand shot out, grabbing Roy by the throat. He lifted him off the floor, and slammed him against the plaster wall. The building shook. Roy made a choked, gagging sound. Luca didn't say a word. He just hit him. It was a sickening sound, a short, brutal punch to the stomach that made Roy's body fold. Luca hit him again, and again. It was precise. It was controlled. It was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. There was no rage in his expression. It was a mask of cold. Absolute focus. He dropped Roy, who slumped to the floor, gasping. "Please," I whispered, flattened against the wall, my hand clutching my throbbing wrist. "Luca, stop!" He didn't hear me. He didn't even know I was in the room. He hauled Roy up by the front of his shirt and hit him in the face. The crack of bone was unmistakable. Roy's head snapped back, and he fell, unconscious. It should have been over. It wasn't. Luca stood over him, breathing hard. He looked at the broken, bleeding man on the floor, and then he kicked him. A hard, vicious kick to the ribs. A small, animal sound came from Roy's throat. "Luca, stop!" I screamed. He didn't look at me, and he was in another world, a black, violent place where I didn't exist. He was exorcising a demon, and he was using Roy's body to do it. He reached down, grabbed Roy by his hair, and hauled his head up. He drew back his fist, his knuckles already split and bloody. This wasn't a punch. This was a killing blow. I could see it. He was going to crush his skull. He was going to murder him right here, in this filthy room. "Luca!" I ran, stumbling, and grabbed his arm, the one he had raised. "Luca, no, please!" His head snapped toward me. For a second, his eyes were still black. He didn't see me. He saw a ghost. He saw something I couldn't understand. His entire body was coiled, a weapon ready to strike. "Please," I sobbed, clinging to his arm, which was hard as steel. "Don't, not for him, for me. Please, come back. Don't do this." His name, my voice, the terror in my eyes. It broke through. I watched humanity flood back into his face. The blackness receded, replaced by a storm of confusion, rage, and a profound, bone-deep shock. He looked at his fist. He looked at Roy, a bleeding, broken thing at his feet. He looked at me, crying, holding on to him. He had stopped. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. He wasn't going to stop. He was going to kill him. He was going to cross that line. And the only thing that had pulled him back was me. He dropped Roy's head. It hit the floor with a wet, dull thud. Luca stood there for a long second, his chest heaving. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by my ragged sobs and Roy's gurgling breaths. He didn't say, "Are you okay?" He didn't ask what happened. He just turned, grabbed my good arm, and said, "We're leaving." He hauled me out of the room, past the shattered door, and down the stairs. He didn't look back. I stumbled after him, my legs shaking. We burst out onto the sidewalk, into the gray afternoon. His black sedan was parked, engine running, directly in front of the building, blocking a fire hydrant. He had known. He knew where I was going. He had tracked me. He had followed me. He opened the passenger door, shoved me inside gently, and slammed it. He got in the driver's side. His knuckles were raw, bleeding all over the steering wheel. He just drove. The silence was heavier than the violence had been. It was a thick, suffocating blanket. I sat, clutching my wrist, my body shaking with aftershocks. I watched the city go by in a blur of gray. He was a monster. He was my savior. He was the man I had called a monster, and he had just proven me right and wrong. I couldn't stand the quiet. I couldn't stand the space between us. I looked at his hands on the wheel, bloody strong, the hands that had almost taken a life, and the hands that had held me so tenderly last night. Slowly, my whole body trembling, I reached across the console. I put my uninjured hand on top of his. His hand was rigid. He flinched, but he didn't pull away. He just kept driving, his jaw set, his eyes fixed on the road. After a long, agonizing minute, he lifted his other hand from the wheel, the one that was bloodier, and covered mine. He didn't interlace his fingers. He just held on. A silent, crushing weight, an anchor. We drove through the gates, which slid open without a sound. He parked in the driveway, not the garage. He cut the engine. We sat in silence for another minute. "He'll live," Luca said, his voice a raw rasp. I nodded. I couldn't speak. "Come on." He got out, came around, and opened my door. He helped me out. His touch careful, as if I were a piece of glass he had just seen shatter. He took me inside. Mrs. Petrov was in the foyer, her face pale. She saw his hands. She saw my face, my wrist, and her lips thinned, but she said nothing. "Bring the kit," Luca said. "My bathroom." "Yes, Mr. Moretti." He led me up the stairs, not to my room, but to his, into the vast marble bathroom. He sat me on a small, upholstered bench. He stood in front of me, under the bright, clinical lights, and just looked at his hands. He seemed lost. Mrs. Petrov came in, placed a large metal first aid box on the counter, and left without a word. Luca opened it. He took out antiseptic, bandages, and tape. He didn't tend to his own wounds. He knelt in front of me. "Let me see," he said, his voice quiet. I held out my arm. My wrist was already turning a sick, dark purple. His fingers, stained with Roy's blood, probed the bone gently. His touch was impossibly light. "It's not broken," he said, "just bruised. Badly." He poured antiseptic on a cotton pad and began to clean the scrapes where Roy's nails had dug into me. He was so gentle. His bloody, broken knuckles were a stark contrast to the care he was taking. He wrapped my wrist in a clean, white bandage, his movements economical and precise. I watched him, the man who had exploded a door, the man who had nearly beaten a man to death. He was on his knees, gently bandaging my wrist like I was a child. The silence was screaming. "If I hadn't been there," I whispered, my voice sounding small in the huge, echoing room. He paused, his hand still on my arm. He didn't look up. "If I hadn't screamed your name, Luca, in the apartment, would you have—" I couldn't say it. He finished securing the tape. He cut it with a small pair of scissors. He sat back on his heels, his hands resting on his knees. He looked at his own bloody knuckles. Then he lifted his head, and his gray eyes met mine. They were clear and haunted. "You saved him, Sabrina," he said, his voice raw with a truth that terrified me. Not me. The confession hung in the air. He wasn't just a killer. He was a killer who knew he was a killer. And he was admitting it to me. I looked at him. Really looked at him. At the monster and the man, kneeling at my feet, the man who had just confessed his darkest truth. I reached out with my good hand. I didn't touch his face. I touched his. I traced the split skin on his knuckles. He flinched, a sharp intake of breath. "This needs to be cleaned," I whispered. He just stared at me. I stood up, went to the sink, and ran a cloth under warm water. I brought it back to him. I sat on the bench, and this time, I was the one who knelt. I took his hand. It was rough, calloused, and bloody. I began to clean the wounds. He didn't move. He just watched me, his gaze so intense it burned. "You came for me," I said, not looking up. "Always," he breathed. "I called you a monster." I stopped cleaning. I looked up. "No, you're not. You stopped. You stopped for me." I lifted his hand, his wounded, violent hand, and I pressed my lips to his knuckles. I kissed the blood. I kissed the pain. I kissed the monster. His body shuddered. He made a sound, a low, broken sound, and pulled me to my feet. He pulled me into his arms, and his mouth found mine. It wasn't like the night before. There was no tenderness at first. It was raw and desperate and full of the violence and the terror of the day. It was a kiss that said I almost lost you, and I almost lost myself. It was a drowning man's kiss. He picked me up, and I wrapped my legs around him, my bandaged wrist pressed between us. He carried me into his bedroom and laid me on the bed. He didn't let me go. He came down on top of me, his weight a comforting, solid presence. He started to unbutton my pants, his hands shaking. "No," I whispered. He froze, pulling back, the haunted look crashing back into his eyes. "Sabrina, You first," I whispered. I sat up, pushing his suit jacket off his shoulders. I need all of it. Luca, no more walls." I unbuttoned his shirt. I pulled it open. I saw the map of his skin, the hard muscle, the dark hair, and the scars. The ones I had felt last night, a long, thin, white line on his ribs, a puckered, round scar on his shoulder. I kissed the scar on his shoulder. He cried out, not a word, just a sharp, broken sound. This time, there was no seduction. There was no question. It was a desperate, mutual surrender. It was a tangible, physical act of healing. He tore down my walls, and I tore down his. He moved inside me with a slow, desperate reverence, his eyes locked on mine. And I cried. I wept for the girl in the market, for the girl in that apartment, for the fear, for the hunger. I wept for him, for the little boy he had been. He didn't stop. He kissed every tear. He whispered my name over and over, a prayer, a promise. He held me, his hands in my hair, on my back, on my face, as if he was trying to absorb me into his skin, to keep me safe inside his own body. It was a physical, emotional unmaking. And when it was over, we were both shaking, shattered, and for the first time, completely whole. We lay in the dark for hours, tangled together, silent. He killed her. His voice was a low rasp in the darkness. I was lying on his chest, my ear over his heart. "What?" I whispered. "My mother." He was staring at the ceiling. "It was a man like Roy. My stepfather, he was a drunk, weak, like Roy. All his strength was in his fists, and only for her, not for other men." He stroked my hair, his hand mechanical. I was 8 years old. He came home angry. The horses he'd lost at the track. He started hitting her. It was normal, but this time was different. He used a bottle. His voice was flat, devoid of all emotion. I tried to stop him. I was 8. I grabbed his leg. He kicked me, and I hit my head on the stove. When I woke up, he was gone, and she was on the kitchen floor. She was cold. He stopped, his throat working. "I never forgave myself," he whispered, and his voice finally broke. The pain in it was a canyon. I was too small. I was too weak. I watched him kill her, and I did nothing. I lifted my head, my own tears blinding me. I looked at him, at this powerful, broken man. "Oh, Luca, when I saw him," he choked out, his control shattering. "When I saw that animal with his hands on you, in that room, all I saw was him, and all I saw was her. I wasn't going to be weak again. I wasn't going to let him. He couldn't finish. He turned his head, burying his face in the pillow. I heard a single, ragged sob, torn from the deepest part of him. I wrapped my arms around him. I held him. I held the mafia boss, the killer, the monster, the savior. I held the 8-year-old boy who couldn't save his mother. I held him while he shook, and I didn't say a word. I just held on. The next morning, I woke up first. He was still asleep. His face turned toward me, in sleep. He looked younger. The hard lines were gone. He looked peaceful. His arm was thrown possessively over my waist. I watched him breathe. I thought about his mother. I thought about the violence of yesterday. He was right. Dante was right. I was a complication. I was his weakness. I was the thing that made him see ghosts. I was the thing that would get him killed. I had nearly made him a murderer in a filthy apartment, and he had nearly gotten himself killed going to war for me. I loved him. The realization was as simple and as absolute as breathing. And because I loved him, I couldn't be the thing that destroyed him. He stirred, his eyes opening. He focused on me, and a small, slow smile touched his lips. It was the first real smile I had ever seen from him. It lit him up from the inside. "Hey," he whispered, his voice rough with sleep. "Hey," I whispered back. My heart was breaking. "Luca," I started, my voice trembling. I can't stay." His smile vanished. The mask slammed back into place. "What?" "I can't," I said, tears already welling. "Look at what happened. I dragged this darkness with me. Roy, Valente, I'm the reason yesterday." I sat up, pulling the sheet with me. "I don't want to be your mother's story, Luca. I don't want to be the reason you get hurt. I don't want to be the weakness that your enemies use to kill you." He was out of the bed in an instant. He was naked, magnificent, and furious. He grabbed my shoulders, his grip gentle but firm. "You're not listening," he said, his voice a low, hard growl. "You're not my weakness, Sabrina. You're my strength. You're the reason I stopped. You're the reason I came back. You're the only part of me that isn't dark. But the danger—" "You're not leaving!" He cut me off. It wasn't a request. It was a vow. "I don't care if Valente burns this city to the ground. You're not leaving. You're part of me now. Do you understand?" I stared at him, my heart pounding. He meant it. "You're part of me now." Later that day, I was in the kitchen, making coffee, my wrist neatly bandaged, my body sore but whole, Mrs. Petrov had the small television on, watching the midday news. I froze. On the screen was a picture of Roy. His face was a swollen, purple, unrecognizable mask. He was being pushed into a police car. The reporter's voice was bright. "Roy Banner, a known associate of the Valente crime family, was arrested late yesterday. He faces charges of aggravated assault, parole violation, and has reportedly agreed to testify against his boss, Nico Valente, in exchange for federal protection." My cup slipped. Luca appeared at my side, his hand steadying mine. He was dressed, clean, his own knuckles bandaged. I looked from the television to him. You turned him over to the police?" "I told you I'd handle it," he said, his voice quiet. You were going to a war. You let me think." "I went to the meeting," he said, taking the cup from my hand and setting it on the counter. "I convinced Mr. Valente that it was in his best interest to give me Roy alive." "And the beating?" "That," he said, his eyes meeting mine, "was for what he did to you. The rest, the police, that was to set you free. He'll be in prison for a very, very long time. He'll never touch you again. He'll never even think your name again. He hadn't just used brute force. He had used his power. He had used his mind. He had navigated his dark world and found a solution that was permanent, legal, and final. He had cut Roy out of my life like a surgeon, not a butcher. He hadn't become the monster I feared. He had controlled it. I looked at him, at the man who had confessed his darkest secrets, at the man who had just moved heaven and earth to give me peace. My trust in him wasn't just a feeling. It was a foundation. It was the only solid ground I had ever stood on. Roy was in prison. The threat that had defined my life, that had kept me running, was gone. He was a memory, a headline, a swollen-faced mugshot on the evening news. The silence he left behind should have been peaceful. It wasn't. It was heavy. In his place, a new, far more dangerous tension had settled over the house. Luca had given me back my life, and in doing so, had started a war. He was moving against Nico Valente. I didn't understand the specifics. I didn't want it, but I saw the map spread out on his study table, covered in red circles marking off whole sections of Coleridge's South Side. I saw the grim, constant presence of Dante Ferretti, his cold eyes sweeping over me every time he entered, as if I were a piece of contraband Luca had foolishly smuggled inside. I heard the low, urgent meetings that went late into the night. Luca was a different man. The tenderness he showed me in the quiet of his bedroom, the bone-deep vulnerability he had confessed, was locked away during the day. He was the boss. He was focused, remote, and his eyes held a cold, strategic light that frightened me. He was a general planning an invasion, and his territory, his honor, and, I feared, his life, were on the line. And I was in the eye of the storm. I was the reason. With Roy gone, the cage of my fear was unlocked, but I was still a prisoner of my past. There was one more ghost, one I had locked away even from Luca. Daniela, my sister. I hadn't spoken her name to him again. The shame was too deep. It was my failure, my original sin, the one that had set me on the path to Roy, to the market, to Luca himself. I had abandoned her. I had to know. I had to see her. Luca had, in his blunt, practical way, insisted on giving me an allowance. It was a ridiculous sum of money, deposited into a new bank account he'd opened in my name. "You work for Mrs. Petrov," he'd said, his jaw tight, refusing to meet my eyes. "You get paid." It was his way of giving me independence, of erasing the debt I felt I owed him. I used that money. I didn't tell him. This was my shame, my pilgrimage. I couldn't bear the look in his eyes if I failed. I found her. It hadn't been hard. A few online searches, a few phone calls to old foster care agencies. She is Daniela Miller now. She lived in the suburbs, a 40-minute cab ride from the stone walls of Luca's fortress. The cab dropped me at the end of a quiet, tree-lined street. The houses were small, neat, and identical. It was a world away from the lower south, and a world away from the cold, opulent grandeur I now lived in. I found the number, 1842, a small, blue house with white shutters. A child's bicycle was lying on its side in the patchy grass. My heart was a cold, hard knot in my throat. I was wearing my new clothes, the dark trousers, the soft sweater. I looked like a stranger. I was a stranger. I walked up the concrete path. I saw them in the backyard, through the chain-link fence. A man I didn't know was at a smoking barbecue grill, a spatula in his hand. A little girl, maybe 3 or 4 years old, was running through a sprinkler, her laughter high and piercing. And then I saw her. She came out the back door, carrying a bowl of potato salad. She wasn't the scrawny, terrified 12-year-old I had left behind. She was a woman. Her hair was lighter. Her body was curved and strong. She looked happy. She looked normal. She set the bowl on a picnic table and laughed at something the man said. I couldn't breathe. I walked to the fence. "Daniela?" My voice was a dry croak. She didn't hear me. "Danny," I said, louder. She froze. The smile melted from her face. She turned, her eyes scanning the yard until they landed on me. She stared. Her face went from confusion to a slow, dawning, sickening recognition. The blood drained from her face. The man at the grill looked over. "Danny? Honey, who's that?" Daniela didn't answer him. She walked toward me, slowly. Her arms crossed over her chest. She stopped a few feet from the fence, a barrier between us. "Sabrina," she said. Her voice was flat, cold. "It's me," I whispered, my eyes burning. "Danny, I finally found you. What are you doing here?" It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. I just wanted to see you," I stammered, "to see if you were okay, to apologize. I'm so sorry, Danny. I was so stupid. I was a kid. You thought you'd run off with that piece of trash and leave me." She cut me off, her voice laced with a cold, 6-year-old fury. "You left me. You left me in that place, with those people. I cried for a month. I waited for you. You never came." "I couldn't," I cried, gripping the chain link. He wouldn't let me. He took my phone. I was trapped. Danny, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," she spat. "I understand you chose him over me. You were all I had, Sabrina, and you threw me away." "No," I sobbed. "It wasn't like that. I'm free now. I'm safe. I have money. I can help you. Please, just let me—" "Help me?" She let out a short, bitter laugh. "Look at me." She gestured to the house, to the man, to the little girl who was now watching us with wide, curious eyes. "I have a life. I have a good life. I have a husband who loves me. I have a daughter. I worked for this. I built this. I did it all without you." The man walked over, wiping his hands on a towel. "Honey, everything all right?" He looked at me, his eyes wary. "It's fine, Mark," Daniela said, her voice tight. "Go back to the grill. I'll handle this." She turned back to me, her eyes like chips of ice. "My name is Daniela Miller. Sabrina Morales is dead. She died 6 years ago, as far as I'm concerned." "Mommy?" The little girl toddled over, clutching Daniela's leg. "Who is that lady?" Daniela put her hand on her daughter's head, stroking her hair. She never took her eyes off me. "No one, baby," she said, her voice suddenly soft for her daughter. "Just a stranger. She's lost. She was just leaving." It was a dismissal. It was a judgment. It was the closing of a door I had been trying to find for 6 years. She was right. I was a ghost. I was dead. "Danny, please," I whispered, one last desperate plea. "Go away, Sabrina," she said, her voice low and final. "Don't you dare come back. Don't you dare bring your world, your trash, near my family. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine. Stay away." She turned. She picked up her daughter. She walked back to her husband, back to her life. She didn't look back. I stood at the fence until the man, Mark, came over, his face hard. "You heard my wife," he said. "You need to leave, now, or I'm calling the police." I just nodded, my body numb. I turned and walked away. I don't remember the cab ride back. I don't remember walking through the gates. My body moved, but my mind was in that backyard, watching my sister call me a stranger. She was right. I wasn't just trash. I was toxic. I was a poison. I had ruined her life, and now I was ruining Luca's. I walked into the house. It was quiet. Mrs. Petrov was nowhere to be seen. I walked, like a ghost, to his study. The door was open. He was at his desk, on the phone. He was in his shirt sleeves, his expression dark. He was in the middle of a sentence. "Don't care what it costs. I want his shipping routes crippled by—" He looked up. He saw my face. His boss mask didn't just crack, it shattered. "I'll call you back," he said, and hung up the phone. Dropping it onto the desk, he stood up. "Sabrina, what happened? Are you hurt?" He crossed the room in 2 strides. He grabbed my arms, his gaze frantic, searching me for wounds. He thought I'd been attacked. And that's when I broke. The numbness evaporated, and the grief, 6 years of it, came roaring to the surface. It was a wail, a sound I didn't recognize. It was the sound of the girl who'd been abandoned, the girl who had abandoned her sister, the girl who had stolen bread. I collapsed. I fell into him, my hands grabbing the front of his shirt, and I sobbed. I sobbed so hard my body shook. He didn't speak. He just wrapped his arms around me, pulling me so tight against his chest I could barely breathe. He held my weight. He let me fall apart. He backed us up, step by step, until he hit his armchair, and he sat, pulling me down into his lap, cradling me like a child. I cried into his shirt, my face buried in his chest. I told him everything about Daniela, about leaving her, about her new life, about her daughter, about her husband, about her telling me I was dead. I told him she was right. I was a poison. He just held me. His hand stroked my hair, his movement slow and steady. He didn't offer to fix it. He didn't tell me I was wrong. He didn't promise to make it better. He just stayed. He absorbed the full, toxic, ugly force of my grief and my shame, and he didn't flinch. He didn't let go. I cried until there was nothing left. I was empty, hollowed out, my body limp in his arms. I was exhausted. We sat there for hours. The sun began to set, filling the room with long, orange shadows. The house was silent. Finally, my voice a raw, ruined whisper. I said, "She's right. I ruin everything I touch." He pulled back, just enough to see my face. His eyes were dark, his expression unreadable. "No," he said, his voice rough. He wiped a tear from my cheek with his thumb. "You don't ruin me. Sabrina, you're the only part that makes sense." He stood, lifting me with him. He led me, my hand in his, to the large abstract painting on the wall behind his desk. He pulled the corner. It swung open on silent hinges, revealing a dark gray, digital safe set into the wall. He typed in a long code. The safe clicked and swung open. It was full, papers, stacks of cash, small, velvet-lined boxes. He reached inside, past all of it, and pulled out a single, small, silver key on a plain ring. He turned to me. He took my hand, turned it palm up, and placed the key in it. "What is this?" I whispered. "It's a spare," he said, his voice quiet. He closed my fingers around it. "It opens this safe. It opens my private box at the bank. It opens the lockbox that has my will, my personal ledgers, my accounts, everything that I am, everything that I own. It's all in there." I stared at the key. It was heavy. "Luca, I can't." "Yes, you can." He put his hand over mine, his warmth surrounding the cold metal. "Dante is right. You're my weakness. My enemies know it. Valente knows it. But they're wrong about one thing." His eyes held mine. "They think you're my vulnerability, but you're my vault. You're the only person I trust, with all of it. With me. You are not toxic. Sabrina, you are my anchor." He had seen the worst, ugliest, most broken part of me, and he had given me the key to his entire world. The attack came 2 days later. The fragile piece of that moment was shattered by a phone call. It was late afternoon. I was in the kitchen trying to help Mrs. Petrov, who was now treating me with a grudging, almost maternal respect. Luca's phone rang. He was at the kitchen island, drinking coffee, the first moment of quiet we'd had all day. He answered. His entire body went rigid. "Where?" he said, his voice a low command. "How many?" He listened. His face was granite. "Lock it down. I'm on my way." He hung up. He met my eyes. The terror was instant. "Luca?" "It's nothing," he said, but he was already moving. "A problem at the South Side warehouse. Valente got sloppy." "Don't go," I said, my voice shaking. "It's a trap." "It's my business, Sabrina." He kissed my forehead, a hard, fast press of his lips. "Marco is here. The house is locked down. You'll be safe." I'm not worried about me." I grabbed his arm. "Luca, please, don't go." "I have to." He looked at me, and for a second, the boss was gone. It was just him. "I'll be back. I promise." He and Marco were gone in 60 seconds. The sound of his sedan peeling down the driveway was the sound of my heart tearing. I sat in the living room. Mrs. Petrov sat with me. We didn't speak. The sun went down. The house was silent, locked. Every creak of the floorboards made me jump. Every hour that passed was an eternity. At 9 o'clock, I heard the car. It wasn't the smooth, controlled arrival of his sedan. It was a scream of tires, a spray of gravel. I ran to the front door just as it burst open. Marco. He was pale, his suit jacket torn. And he was holding Luca. Luca was slumped against him, his arm draped over Marco's shoulders. His face was a waxy, ashen gray I had never seen. His left side, from his ribs to his hip, was a solid, dark, glistening mass of blood. "Oh my God," I whispered. My legs gave out. "Sabrina! Now!" Marco's voice was a roar. "Help me! Get him to the couch! Mrs. Petrov, the kit, the big one, and the whiskey!" The numbness broke. Adrenaline, cold and sharp, flooded my system. I wasn't the girl who fainted. I wasn't the girl who ran. "Put him here," I said, my voice shaking but clear. I swiped the pillows off the leather sofa. Marco and I lowered him. Luca groaned, a low, animal sound of pure agony. His eyes were half closed, his breathing shallow and fast. He's alive," Marco panted, ripping open Luca's shirt. "It was an ambush. Valente was waiting. We got out, but he took a ricochet. I think it's deep." Mrs. Petrov was there with the metal first aid box. She was pale but calm. "Get his belt off," I said. I was unbuttoning his trousers, my hands slick with his blood. We had to get the pressure off. He was so vulnerable. The man of pure, absolute control was lying on his sofa, bleeding, his face contorted in pain. He was just a man. He was my man. "Here, Mrs." Petrov handed me sterile pads. "Press. Hard. I will get the sutures." I pressed. Luca cried out, his back arching off the couch. "I'm sorry," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. I'm sorry. "It's okay," he gasped, his eyes finding mine. He was trying to smile, just a scratch. "You're an idiot," I sobbed, pressing harder. It took an hour of blood and whiskey and muttered curses from Luca. The bullet had grazed his ribs, tearing a deep, long gash in his side. It hadn't hit an organ. He was lucky. We cleaned him. We stitched him. We bandaged him. Marco and I half carried him upstairs, and we laid him in his own bed. He was weak, shaking, and finally passed out from the pain, the blood loss, and the half bottle of whiskey we'd poured down his throat. I sat in the chair by his bed all night. I just watched him breathe. I must have dozed off. I woke to a sound. A cry. "Mama!" I sat up. Luca was thrashing. He was tangled in the sheets, his face slick with sweat, his eyes screwed shut. He was dreaming. "No, don't. Mama, run!" He was there, and he was 8 years old again, in that kitchen, watching his mother die, the trauma, the drugs, the pain. It had all brought it to the surface. I didn't try to wake him. I didn't call his name. I stood up. I slid into the bed beside him, my movements slow. I lay on top of the covers. He was still thrashing. I laid my hand, the one he had put a key in, flat on his chest, right over his heart. I didn't say anything. I just breathed. I felt his heart hammering under my palm. I pushed my own calm, my own presence, into him. "I'm here. I'm not leaving. You're not alone. I'm here." He didn't wake up, but the thrashing slowed. His breathing, ragged and terrified, began to deepen. He settled. The nightmare receded. He turned, still asleep, and his hand found mine, his fingers laced with mine, a grip of iron, even in unconsciousness. He didn't have to face the ghosts alone anymore. The next morning, Dante arrived. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He found me in the hall outside Luca's room. "How is he?" His voice was clipped. "He's sleeping. The doctor said he was lucky. He needs rest." "I need to see him." He needs rest, I repeated, standing in front of the door. Dante looked at me, his eyes full of a cold, profound hatred. You did this, he hissed. All of it, this mess, is because of you. He was untouchable for 20 years. You've been here for 2 months, and he's in bed with a bullet in him. Get out of my way, Dante! Luca's voice. It was weak, raw, but it was a command. He was standing in the doorway, leaning against the frame, his face pale. He was wearing just his pajama pants, his entire side wrapped in white bandages. Dante's anger faded, replaced by a strained concern. Luca, you should be in bed. We have a problem. We? Luca said, his voice rough. I have a problem, and you're yelling at it. Be reasonable. Dante stepped into the room. This is a disaster. Valente is wounded, but he's not gone. The police are all over the warehouse. They're using that junkie, Banner. His testimony is linking her to you. They're building a racketeering case. Luca, and she is the star witness they're going to use to burn you. He pointed a finger at me. Cut her loose. Send her away. Somewhere far. Give her money, whatever it takes, but get her out of your life. It's the only way to save yourself. Luca looked at Dante. He looked at me, standing in the hall, my face white, my heart in my throat. He pushed himself off the doorframe, hissing in pain, but he stood tall. Dante, he said, his voice quiet, get out. Luca, I am your consigliere. I am advising you. And I am your boss. Get out. We're done here. You are choosing her over the family? Over everything? Dante was apoplectic. Luca walked, wincing, until he was standing in the doorway, next to me. He put his arm around my waist, leaning on me for support. He looked at Dante. If she falls, he said, his voice clear and final, I fall too. Dante stared, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. He turned, his shoulders stiff, and stormed down the hall. Luca sagged against me, his breathing heavy. You're an idiot, I whispered, my voice thick, as I helped him back to bed. I know, he breathed, his eyes closing in pain. But I'm your idiot. The final blow landed 2 days later. Luca was stronger, walking, his ribs aching but his anger returning. The house was in lockdown. We were in the living room, the television on low. A breaking news banner flashed across the screen. 1 new developments in the case against organized crime boss Nico Valente, the reporter said. We have just obtained this leaked video from a police interrogation room of star witness Roy Banner. The screen filled with a grainy, black and white video. It was Roy. His face was a swollen, purple mask. He was talking to a detective we couldn't see. Yeah, Moretti took her. Roy's voice whined. He said she was protected. He found me at her old place. He beat me. Nearly killed me. And she was there. She saw the whole thing. She saw everything. She's part of it now. Just as much as he is. The reporter was back. Sources say the woman at the center of this, Sabrina Morales, is now considered a material witness in the beating of Roy Banner, and a person of interest in the broader investigation into Luca Moretti's alleged criminal enterprise. Police are expected to bring her in for questioning. The remote shattered against the wall. Luca had thrown it. I was frozen. My blood was ice. It wasn't just Valente. It wasn't just Dante's disapproval. The police, they were coming. For me. Luca was staring at the screen. At my name. At my face. Which they'd plastered next to his and Roy's. His jaw was so tight I thought it would break. The safety he had built, the walls he had put around me, had just been breached, and the world was flooding in. The news report was a death sentence. My name, my face, my association with Luca, it was all laid bare. I was no longer a shadow, a helper, a secret. I was a material witness, a person of interest. I was the lever the district attorney was going to use to bring Luca's entire world crashing down. Turn it off, Luca said, his voice dangerously quiet. Mrs. Petrov, her face ashen, fumbled for the button on the television itself, as the remote was in pieces against the far wall. The room fell into a thick, suffocating silence. They can't, I whispered, my voice shaking. They can't make me testify. I won't. I'll tell them Roy lied. I'll tell them. They don't care about the truth, Sabrina. Luca turned to me, his face a mask of cold, controlled fury. The wound in his side, still wrapped in bandages beneath his shirt, was the least of his worries. They have Banner's testimony. They have you at the scene. They will paint you as an accomplice, a willing participant. They will threaten you with 20 years just to get you to say my name in a courtroom. Then I'll go, I said, my voice gaining a desperate, fragile strength. I'll go to prison. I don't care. I won't let them use me to hurt you. I won't be the weapon they use. No, he said. The word was final. It was an iron door slamming shut. Luca, you don't understand, and you, he said, stepping close, his hands coming up to cup my face, his thumbs stroking my cheeks. His eyes were dark, a storm of strategy and a raw, protective instinct that terrified me. You will not set foot in a police station. You will not answer their questions. You will not be touched by them. This ends now. Before I could argue, the intercom buzzed. Marco's voice, grim and tight, came through the speaker. Boss, they're here. 2 detectives. They're asking for Miss Morales. My blood turned to ice. I looked at Luca, my eyes wide with panic. They're here for me. Mrs. Petrov, Luca said, his voice calm. Show the detectives into the study. Offer them coffee. Tell them I will be there in a moment. Do not, under any circumstances, let them see Sabrina. He didn't wait for an answer. He kissed my forehead, a hard, brief press of his lips. Stay in this room. Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone but me. Do you understand? Luca, what are you going to do? I pleaded, grabbing his arm. His muscles were rigid. I'm going to do what I should have done from the beginning, he said, his voice a low growl. I'm going to make a deal. He was gone. I heard his heavy footsteps in the hall, followed by the low murmur of voices as he greeted the detectives. I did as I was told. I locked the door. I sat on the edge of the sofa, my hands knotted in my lap, and I waited. I waited for 2 hours, 2 lifetimes. The silence of the house was absolute. I was a prisoner again, but this time, the walls weren't to keep Roy out. They were to keep the whole world out. When the lock on the living room door finally clicked, I nearly screamed. Luca entered. He looked exhausted. The fight was gone. He looked hollowed out. What happened? I whispered, rushing to him. What did you tell them? He walked past me to the bar and poured himself a glass of water, his hand shaking slightly. The wound was clearly bothering him. They won't be back, he said, his back to me. What does that mean? What did you do? He drank the water in one long pull, then set the glass down. He turned to face me. I met with the district attorney this afternoon. You went to his office. Well, Marco drove me. While you were sleeping, I knew this was coming. Luca. He wanted you. Sabrina, Luca said, his voice flat. He wanted you as a material witness. He was going to put you on the stand, tear you apart, and force you to choose between perjury and sending me to prison. I told you, I would have... I know, he interrupted, and his voice softened. I know what you would have done. You would have lied for me. You would have gone to jail for me. And that is why I could not let it happen. He took a deep breath, and it seemed to cost him. So I gave him something else, something he wanted more. I waited, my heart hammering. I gave him the South Side. I didn't understand. The warehouses? The ones Valente attacked? All of it, he said, his voice heavy. The shipping routes, the warehouses, the nightclubs, all of it. The territory my father spent 30 years building. The territory I've been fighting Valente for. You gave it to them, to the police. I agreed to surrender all control. I'm pulling my men out, my operations, everything, effective immediately. In exchange, he looked at me, and the weight in his eyes was heavier than any prison sentence. The DA gets to claim a victory. He gets to tell the press he's cleaned up the South Side. He gets to be a hero. And in exchange, the investigation into you is closed. The beating of Roy Banner is attributed to unknown Valente associates. You are immune. Your name is clear. You are, for all legal purposes, a ghost. I stumbled back, my hand over my mouth. You gave up your empire for me. It's just brick and mortar, he whispered, walking toward me. It's just dirt. It's not real. But Dante, your family, Dante works for me, and my family. He stopped in front of me, his gaze holding mine. My family is in this room. He had sacrificed his past, his legacy, his power, all for my freedom. He had seen the two paths, one where he kept his kingdom and one where he kept me safe, and he hadn't hesitated. "It's over, Sabrina," he said, his voice rough. "You're free. No more police. No more Roy. No more Valente. It's done." He thought it was over. He thought he had solved it. He had cut off one head of the Hydra, but he didn't realize the monster was still watching. The next day, the house was quiet. Luca was in his study, dealing with the fallout. Dante had been in and out, his face a mask of thunderous, unspoken rage. The surrender of the South Side was a betrayal Dante couldn't comprehend. I was restless. I was free, but I felt more trapped than ever. Luca had put me in a gilded cage, and the price of my safety was his own power. I was in the kitchen, staring out the window, when my phone rang. It was a new phone, one Luca had given me, with a number only he and Mrs. Petrov had... I answered it. "Hello?" "Sabrina Morales." The voice was not one I knew. It was slick, with a faint, chilling amusement. "I'm so glad I found you. I was worried you wouldn't pick up." "Who is this?" I said, my blood turning cold. "This is Nico Valente. I believe you've caused me a great deal of trouble. You and your boyfriend. He took something from me, my business, my reputation, so I thought it was only fair. I will take something from you." "I don't know what you're talking about," I lied, my hand gripping the counter. "Oh, I think you do." He laughed, a dry, ugly sound. "I have your sister." The world stopped. The kitchen, the trees outside, my own heartbeat. It all just stopped. "You're lying," I whispered. "Am I? Let's see." There was a rustling sound. I heard a woman's voice, muffled, crying. "Shut up!" Valente snarled. Then, her voice came on the line, sharp and terrified. "Sabrina! Oh my God! Sabrina! He has my daughter! He has Ellie! Please, I don't know what's going on. He said you'd know." It was Daniela. "No!" I choked out, sinking to the floor. "No, no, no, not her! Not her!" Valente came back on the line. "Her name is Daniela, right? Pretty little family, a husband, a daughter. It would be a shame if something happened to them. All because of you." "Oh, what do you want?" I screamed. Tears of pure, undiluted terror streaming down my face. "I'll do anything, please. Just don't hurt them. They're not part of this." "Oh, but they are," he hissed. "You made them part of this when you went to see her. You led us right to her. My men have been watching her for a week, ever since you showed up. My visit, my stupid, selfish visit, I had led this monster right to her door. I had marked her. I had, for the second time in my life, destroyed her. Here's the deal. Sabrina, you're going to give Luca a message for me. I want him. He wants to surrender? Fine. He can surrender to me. Tonight. Midnight, the old Coleridge train yard. He comes alone. He gives himself to me. And I let your sister and her kid go. He doesn't come or he brings his men. I'll send your sister back to you, piece by piece. Am I clear?" "Yes," I sobbed. "Yes, please, don't hurt her." "Midnight, tell him, alone." The line went dead. I was on the floor, hyperventilating. Mrs. Petrov found me, her hands fluttering in panic. "Miss Sabrina, what is it? What's wrong?" I couldn't speak. I just pointed, "Get Luca, now!" He was there in 30 seconds. He saw my face. He saw the phone, and he knew. What did he do? I told him, the train yard, midnight, alone. Daniela, her daughter. The blood drained from his face, the wound in his side, the loss of his territory. It was all nothing. This was the one blow he wasn't prepared for. Valente hadn't just attacked his business. He had attacked me. He had attacked my past. "Luca," I said, grabbing his shirt, my voice shaking. He said, "My visit, I led them to her. This is my fault. It's all my fault." "No." He grabbed my shoulders, his grip hard. "This is his fault. He crossed a line." "What are you going to do?" I whispered, dreading the answer. He looked at the clock. It was 7 p.m. "I'm going to the train yard," he said. "Alone? Luca, no, it's a trap. He's going to kill you. He won't let her go. He'll kill all of you." "He wants me," Luca said, his voice flat. "He can have me. If it gets Daniela and her daughter out, he can have me." "No," I screamed. "I won't let you. I won't trade you for them. I'll go. It's me he really wants." "He doesn't want you. Sabrina, he wants my head, and he's using the only thing in the world he knows I'll trade it for." He turned to Marco, who was standing in the doorway, his face grim. "Get the car ready." "Boss, you can't be serious," Marco said. "Go in there alone? After the warehouse? It's suicide." "It's an exchange." Luca said, "Get the car." "No," I said, standing up. "No, I am not letting you go alone. I am not sitting here while you walk into a trap. I'm going with you." Absolutely not, Ma," Luca snarled. "You're the one person who is not leaving this house." "And what am I supposed to do, Luca?" I shrieked, my control snapping. "Sit here and wait. Wait to find out if my sister is dead. Wait to find out if you're dead. I am not that girl anymore. I am not the girl who runs. I am not the girl who hides. That is my sister out there. My sister who I already failed once. I am not failing her again, and I am not letting you die for my mistakes. I am going." He stared at me. He saw the fire in my eyes. He saw that I was, for the first time, as immovable as he was. I wasn't the stray. I wasn't the victim. I was the woman who had held his key. "It will be dangerous," he said, his voice low. "I know," I said, my voice steady, though my body was vibrating with fear. "You do exactly what I say. You stay in the car. You do not get out. No matter what you hear, Marco will be with you. He will get you and Daniela to safety. That is the only way this works." "And you?" I whispered. "I am the trade," he said simply. "Marco, get the car, and get me my vest, and get one for Sabrina." The abandoned train yard was a graveyard of steel. Rusting boxcars sat on dead tracks, skeletons under a pale, sick-looking moon. The air was cold and smelled of diesel and decay. Marco parked the car, the sedan, 100 yards from the center of the yard, behind a crumbling brick depot. He cut the engine. The silence was deafening. "Stay here," Luca commanded. I was in the back seat, my body rigid, a heavy vest strapped to my chest. It felt like a coffin. Marco was in the driver's seat. "Boss, let me go with you," Marco pleaded. "Let me be your eyes." "You have one job," Luca said, checking the gun he had tucked in the small of his back. "Protect her. Get them out. That's an order. Marco." "Luca," I whispered, reaching for him. He turned, and he got into the back seat, half kneeling, and grabbed my face. He kissed me. It wasn't a kiss of passion, it was a kiss of goodbye. It was desperate and hard, and it tasted of fear and iron. "You're part of me now," he whispered against my lips, "no matter what happens." "Don't you dare," I sobbed, clinging to him. "Don't you dare leave me." "I love you, Sabrina." It was the first time he had said it. He said it, and then he let me go. He got out of the car. He stood for a moment, a tall, dark silhouette, and then he started walking. He walked out into the open, his hands raised, showing they were empty. "Valente," he shouted, his voice echoing off the metal. "I'm here. I'm alone." A spotlight flared to life, blinding, pinning him from the top of an old boxcar. "Well, well," Valente's voice boomed over a loudspeaker. "The great Luca Moretti. Come to surrender." Valente stepped out from behind the boxcar. He was not alone. He had at least 10 men, all armed, all focused on Luca. "Where are they?" Luca called, his voice steady. "Impatient." Valente laughed. He snapped his fingers. Two of his men dragged Daniela forward. She was gagged, her eyes wide with terror. They were holding her daughter, Ellie, a small, whimpering bundle. "No," I gasped, my hand flying to the door handle. "Don't," Marco snarled, his hand on his own gun. "Not yet." "Let them go," Luca said. "You want me? Here I am. Let them go. Let them walk to the car." "The car?" Valente's head snapped toward us. "You didn't come alone?" "My driver," Luca said, not missing a beat. "And the girl, you wanted me. You got me. But you don't get them. Let the women go, Valente. This is between us. Men of honor." Valente spat. "Honor? You talk to me of honor? After you crippled my business? After you turned my man over to the cops? Let them go." Valente stared at him for a long, agonizing moment. He wanted Luca. He wanted the kill. And he knew, if he hurt Daniela, Luca would never stop. This was his one chance. "Fine," Valente snarled. He nodded to his men. "Let them go. Let him watch them run before he dies." The men shoved Daniela. She stumbled, fell, then scrambled to her feet. They handed her Ellie. She ran, half falling, half crawling, her sobs echoing in the night. "Sabrina!" she screamed, running toward the dark shape of our car. "Marco, get ready," I said. Marco opened his door. Daniela reached the car, and he grabbed her, pulling her and the child into the back seat with me. She was a shaking, sobbing mess. "It's okay," I said, holding her. "It's okay, Danny, you're safe." He's, she gasped, pointing back at Luca. I looked. Valente was smiling. He had raised a gun. He was pointing it directly at Luca's chest. "A deal's a deal, Moretti," Valente sneered. "Marco, go!" I screamed. "Get them out!" "I'm not leaving him!" Marco shouted back. He drew his weapon and fired 2 shots at the spotlight. It exploded, plunging the yard into darkness. "No," Luca roared. The world erupted. Gunfire, shouts, muzzle flashes from every direction. It was an ambush inside a trap. Valente had never planned to let any of us leave. "Stay down!" Marco yelled, opening his door and using it as a shield, firing back into the darkness. Daniela was screaming, holding her daughter. I saw him, Luca. He had dived behind a stack of rusted barrels, his own gun out. He was firing, but he was pinned. There were too many of them. I saw a muzzle flash from our left. I heard Marco grunt. "Marco." He slid down in his seat, his hand clutching his shoulder. I'm hit, Sabrina. Get out of here. I'm not leaving you." Another bullet hit the car, shattering the windshield. Daniela screamed again. I looked at Marco. He was bleeding, his gun on the floor of the car. I looked at Daniela, hysterical. I looked out into the darkness, at the flashes of light that were all aimed at the barrels where Luca was hiding. He was going to die. They were going to kill him, and then they were going to kill us. I was not the girl who runs. I grabbed Marco's gun. It was heavy, so heavy. "Sabrina, no!" Marco yelled. "Cover your ears!" I screamed at Daniela. I opened the door. I stayed low, using the car as a shield. I could see them. 2 men, moving in on Luca's position from the side. They didn't see me. They were focused on him. I raised the gun. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely aim. I'd never held a gun. "You saved him, not me." I thought of Luca's mother. I thought of the 8-year-old boy who was too small. I wasn't too small. I pointed the gun, both hands, just like I'd seen in movies, and I pulled the trigger. The sound was deafening. The kick nearly tore it from my hands. I screamed. But the man I was aiming at, he stumbled, he cried out, he went down. The other one turned, surprised, and fired at me. The bullet sparked off the car, inches from my head. I fired again and again, just pulling the trigger, my eyes squeezed shut. When I opened them, he was on the ground, and there was silence. The shooting had stopped. "Valente!" Luca's voice roared from the darkness. "Here, you bastard!" Valente's voice spat from somewhere near the boxcar. "Why, it's over!" Luca shouted. "Your men are gone. It's just us." Just us, Valente agreed. Come on out, Moretti. Let's finish this, or I'll just wait until your girl comes out again. No, Lucas said. I'm coming. He stepped out from behind the barrels. He walked into the center of the yard, his hands empty. Here I am, he said. Valente stepped out. He had his gun. He was smiling. You're a fool, Moretti, Valente said. You gave it all up, for her, for a piece of trash from the gutter, and now you die for her. He raised his gun. Luca, I screamed. I saw a flash, not from Valente, from Luca, and he'd had a second gun, in an ankle holster. He fired. Valente fired at the same time. Both men fell. It was over. Silence, a terrible, absolute silence. No, I whispered. I dropped the gun. I ran. I ran across the yard, stumbling on the gravel. Luca! Valente was on the ground, his chest a dark stain. He wasn't moving. Luca was 10 feet away, on his back. Luca! I fell to my knees beside him. Oh my God! Oh my God! He was clutching his chest. Blood was seeping through his fingers. Sabrina! He gasped. You're okay, I sobbed, fumbling with his shirt. You're okay. You're wearing a vest, right? You were wearing a vest. I ripped his shirt open. The vest was there, but it was high. The bullet. It had hit him high, in the shoulder, near the collarbone. Hey, he whispered, his eyes fluttering. You saved me. Shut up, I cried, pressing my hands to the wound. Just shut up, Marco, get the car. We need an ambulance. Sabrina, Daniela was running toward me. Is he... He's alive, he's alive. Go back to Marco, help him. Call 911, tell them... I don't care, just call. She ran back. I looked at Luca. His face was pale. You got a hell of a... He coughed, and blood flecked his lips. A hell of a shot, Sabrina. Don't talk, I cried. Just stay with me. You're not leaving me. You promised. You're not allowed to leave me. It's okay, he whispered, his hand coming up, his fingers brushing my cheek. You're free now, Daniela. She's safe. Valente's gone. It's over. You're free. I don't want to be free, I screamed at him, pressing my forehead to his, my tears raining down on his face. You idiot, I don't want freedom, I want you. Do you hear me? I choose you. His eyes focused on mine. He saw the truth. He saw that I wasn't his prisoner. I was his partner. Okay, he whispered, a small, pained smile touching his lips. Okay. The sirens were in the distance. He closed his eyes. No, I whispered. Luca, stay with me. Stay with me. He was just unconscious. He had to be. He was just unconscious. The hospital was a blur of white lights and antiseptic smells. They had taken Luca and Marco and Daniela and Ellie. They had taken my sister and her daughter to a private room to be checked. They had taken Marco to get his shoulder stitched. And they had taken Luca to surgery. I was sitting in a waiting room, still covered in his blood. A police officer had tried to talk to me. I had just stared at him, my mind empty. I was in shock. Daniela found me. She sat down next to me, her face pale. He's a good man, she whispered. I just nodded, my eyes fixed on the surgery light. Sabrina, she said, her voice small. What I said, at my house, I was scared. I was so angry, for so long. You were right, I said, my voice hollow. I abandoned you. No, she said, and she took my hand, my bloody, shaking hand. You were just a kid. I see that now. I see what you've been through. I see who you are. You saved my life. You saved my daughter's life. He saved us, I whispered. No, she said, squeezing my hand. We saved each other. All of us. The surgeon came out. I was on my feet before he even spoke. He's stable, the doctor said. He's very, very lucky. The bullet hit his clavicle. It broke the bone, but it missed the artery by 2 centimeters. He lost a lot of blood, but he's going to make a full recovery. He's a tough man. I sagged, the relief so absolute I almost fainted. Can I see him? He was in a private room, pale, hooked up to an IV, but breathing. He was breathing. I sat by his bed. I didn't let go of his hand. I just sat there, and I watched him live. 2 days later, he was awake. I was in the same chair. He turned his head. His eyes found me. "Hey," he rasped. "Hey," I whispered, my heart aching. "You're still here," he said. "I'm not leaving." He smiled, a small, pained wince. "The police, Dante, they said..." Daniela's statement. She said Valente's men fired first, that Marco was hit, that you were just... It was self-defense. They're calling it justifiable. It's all over. Sabrina, for real, this time. "I know," I said, putting my head on his good shoulder. "You're free," he whispered again, his hand stroking my hair. "You don't have to be tied to me. You can go to Daniela. You can have that life, the one you deserve." I lifted my head. I looked at him, at this beautiful, broken, strong man who had given up his entire world, who had walked into a hail of bullets, all for me. The man who thought, even now, that he was a cage. "I don't want that life," I said, my voice clear. "I don't want freedom if it means leaving you. Don't you get it? You are my life. Luca, you're not my cage. You're my home." He stared at me, and I saw the last wall, the one around his heart, the one he had built when he was 8 years old, finally crumble. "You saved me, Sabrina," he whispered, his voice thick. "I know," I said, and I kissed him. "We'll save each other." 1 month later, the sun was shining. Coleridge City felt different, lighter. Luca was out of the hospital, his arm in a sling, but his old power was back. But it was different, too. It was quieter, calmer. We were walking in the lower south. I had asked him to. We stopped in front of the corner market. The bell chimed. The same owner was at the counter. He looked up. His eyes went wide. He saw Luca. Then he saw me. He went pale. "Mr. Moretti," he stammered, nodding, his gaze full of fear. "Sir, ma'am." Luca just nodded. He walked to the back of the store with me, to the bread rack. I reached out. I picked up a loaf of cheap, white bread. I picked up a bag of red apples. I walked to the counter. The owner was wringing his hands. "Please," he said, looking at Luca. It's in the house. Whatever she wants." Luca smiled, a slow, easy smile. He leaned against the counter. "Whatever she wants," he said, his voice soft. "Put it on my account." I looked at Luca, at his smile. I looked at the owner. I looked at the bread in my hands. I put the bread on the counter, and then I reached into the pocket of my jeans. I pulled out a $10 bill, my own money, from my own bank account. I pushed it onto the counter. "I can pay for it," I said, my voice clear and strong. I took the bread. I took the change. I put it in my pocket. Luca's eyes were shining. He was so proud. I thought my heart might burst. We walked out. The bell chimed. The sun was warm on my face. We walked hand in hand. "Thank you for finding me," I whispered, leaning my head on his good shoulder. He stopped. He turned me to face him. He kissed my forehead. "No, Sabrina," he whispered, his voice full of a love I finally understood. "You saved me first. Thank you so much for listening to our story. It means the world to us. We would love to know where you are listening from, so please drop a comment and let us know. It is amazing to see how far these stories can travel. If you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing to our channel, Mafia Romance Stories, for more stories just like this one. And finally, please share your thoughts on Sabrina and Luca's journey. We read all the comments and we love hearing from you. Please share your thoughts in English. Thank you again, and we will see you in the next story.